My lazy wife won a lottery worth $73 million. Then she kicked me out saying, "Disappear," and vanished from the face of the earth. I don't care. You're useless now. Days later, the lottery company's lawyer laughed. Did you even read the terms and condition? My wife went pale because the terms said, you know that moment when your whole damn world flips upside down faster than a pancake on a Sunday morning? Yeah, well, mine happened on a Tuesday night while I was sitting in my raggedy lazy boy, nursing a beer that cost more than I wanted to admit, watching some mindless reality TV about people whose biggest problem was choosing between a yacht or a private jet. Real relatable stuff, right? The lottery drawing was on in the background, just white noise, really. Clarissa had been buying tickets religiously for 3 years, convinced that someday her lucky numbers would hit big. Lucky numbers, my ass. They were the dates we got married, her birthday, and some random crap she claimed came to her in a dream. I used to tease her about it, calling it her retirement plan, but after working double shifts at Martinez Auto Repair for the past 4 years, scraping together enough cash to keep our heads above water, I'd stopped finding it funny. Hell, I'd stopped finding much of anything funny. Then it happened. Oh my God. Oh my God. Darian. Clarissa's voice cut through the apartment like a fire alarm at 3 in the morning. She was standing in front of the TV, clutching that crumpled piece of paper like it was the Holy Grail, shaking so hard I thought she might vibrate right through the floor. The numbers. The numbers. I looked up from my beer, annoyed that she was interrupting the one moment of peace I'd had all week. What numbers, Clarissa? What are you? $73 million, she shrieked, and I swear to God, every dog in a 3-block radius started howling. Darian, we're rich. We're fucking rich. Now, let me tell you something about my wife Clarissa Monroe. Well, Clarissa Monroe Hayes, though she'd been dropping the Hayes part more and more lately. She's got a flair for the dramatic that would make Broadway actors jealous. The woman once cried for 20 minutes because Starbucks was out of pumpkin spice syrup. So when she started jumping around our living room like she'd just won the Super Bowl, my first instinct was skepticism wrapped in a thick layer of here we go again. But then I saw her face. Really saw it. The color had drained out completely, leaving her looking like she'd seen a ghost, and her hands were trembling so violently that the lottery ticket was making a sound like autumn leaves in the wind. This wasn't one of her usual performances. This was something else entirely. Let me see that, I said, setting down my beer and getting up from my chair. My knees creaked. Too many hours bent over car engines, too many years of living paycheck to paycheck, too many nights wondering if we'd make rent this month. She handed me the ticket, and I looked at the numbers on the screen, then at the ticket, then back at the screen. Holy shit. Holy actual shit. The numbers matched. Every single goddamn one of them. Jesus Christ, Clarissa, I whispered, sinking back into my chair because my legs suddenly felt like they were made of jello. This is real. It's real, she screamed, doing some kind of victory dance that looked like she was having a seizure set to music. We're millionaires, Darian. Millionaires. I wanted to believe it was our miracle. God knows we needed one. After 7 years of marriage that felt more like a prison sentence with good behavior, after working myself into the ground fixing other people's cars while mine sat in the driveway held together with duct tape and prayer, after watching Clarissa spend money we didn't have on clothes she didn't need, while I ate ramen noodles for lunch 6 days a week, maybe, just maybe, life was finally cutting us a break. We celebrated that night like we were 21 again. Ordered pizza from Tony's, the good stuff, not the cardboard crap from the gas station, and I even splurged on a bottle of champagne. Well, champagne-flavored wine product. Close enough. Clarissa was already on her phone, posing with the winning ticket like it was her newborn baby, uploading photos to Instagram with captions like, "Dreams do come true," and "blessed beyond measure." I paid for the pizza, naturally. Some things never change, even when you're holding a ticket worth more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. That's when I noticed her brother Marcus lurking in the corner like a vulture circling roadkill. The guy had showed up about an hour after Clarissa's Instagram post. Funny how fast news travels when money's involved. He was whispering in her ear, pointing at the ticket, making gestures I couldn't quite read. Something about the way he was smirking made my stomach turn, but I pushed the feeling down. This was supposed to be a celebration, right? Our big break. Our chance to finally stop worrying about every damn dollar. Marcus thinks we should get a lawyer, Clarissa said, glancing over at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You know, to handle all the legal stuff. Smart, I said, taking a sip of the fake champagne and trying to ignore the fact that it tasted like carbonated grape juice mixed with regret. We'll definitely need help with taxes and investments and all that. Marcus laughed, this low, ugly sound that reminded me of nails on a chalkboard. Oh, there's going to be a lot of changes around here, he said, not looking at me. A lot of changes. I should have paid more attention to that comment. I should have asked what he meant. But I was too busy staring at that lottery ticket, too busy calculating how many double shifts I'd never have to work again, too busy imagining a future where I didn't have to choose between fixing the dishwasher and buying groceries. The doorbell rang around 10 o'clock, and Clarissa's mother Eleanor swept in like she owned the place. Which, given that I'd been paying rent for the past 3 years while Clarissa found herself, wasn't entirely inaccurate. Eleanor Monroe was the kind of woman who wore pearls to the grocery store and perfume that cost more than my monthly car payment. She kissed Clarissa on both cheeks, because apparently regular hugs were for peasants, and immediately started talking about mansions and yachts and European vacations. Not once did she look at me. Not once did she acknowledge the husband who'd been keeping her daughter's lights on and her fridge stocked while she spent her afternoons scrolling through designer catalogs and complaining about how boring her life was. I stood there holding the champagne bottle like some kind of butler, listening to Eleanor plan our future without consulting me about any of it. The first thing you need to do is find a proper financial advisor, Eleanor said, settling into my chair like she'd paid for it. Someone who understands how to handle serious money. Not like those discount brokers who advertise on late-night television. Clarissa nodded eagerly, hanging on every word like her mother was dispensing wisdom from Mount Olympus instead of the same bullshit advice you could get from any financial planning website. What about property? Should we start looking at houses? Houses? Eleanor laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. Darling, with $73 million, you're looking at estates. Compounds. Properties with names, not addresses. I cleared my throat. Maybe we should slow down a bit. You know, take some time to figure out what we really want before we start making big decisions. Both women turned to look at me like I'd just suggested we donate the money to charity and move into a cardboard box. Eleanor's perfectly penciled eyebrows rose so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. Of course, she said in that tone rich people use when they're pretending to be polite. How thoughtful. But her eyes said something different. Her eyes said I was an obstacle to be removed. I told myself the money might soften her heart. I told myself that once the shock wore off, once we got used to the idea of being wealthy, things would get better between us. I told myself that $73 million was enough to fix whatever had gone wrong in our marriage, enough to make Clarissa look at me the way she used to, back when I was her hero instead of her burden. I was wrong about all of it. But that night, standing in our crappy apartment with pizza grease on my fingers and fake champagne bubbling in my glass, watching my wife pose for selfies with our winning lottery ticket while her mother planned our new life and her brother whispered secrets in the corner. That night, I still believed in miracles. I should have known better. Miracles, it turns out, come with terms and conditions. And I was about to learn them the hard way. 3 days. That's how long it took for my fairy tale to turn into a goddamn horror movie. 3 measly days between, we're rich, honey, and get the hell out of my life. If that's not some kind of record for going from hero to zero, it should be. I woke up that Thursday morning thinking maybe we'd finally talk about our plans like actual married people. You know, sit down with some coffee, maybe even splurge on the good stuff from that fancy place downtown, and figure out how 2 broke-ass nobodies were supposed to handle more money than God. Stupid me, right? I was still operating under the delusion that we existed in Clarissa's vocabulary. The first red flag should have been the fact that she wasn't in bed when I woke up. Clarissa Monroe had never seen 9 a.m. from the conscious side in all the years I'd known her. The woman treated sleeping in like it was an Olympic sport she was training for. But there I was, rolling over to find cold sheets and the distant sound of hushed voices coming from the kitchen. I padded down the hallway in my boxers and the ratty Metallica t-shirt I'd been wearing since college, expecting to find her on the phone with some reporter or lottery official. Instead, I found Marcus leaning against my kitchen counter like he owned the place, sipping coffee from my favorite mug, the one that said, "World's okayest husband," that Clarissa had given me as a joke 3 Christmases ago. Funny how that joke wasn't so funny anymore. Clarissa was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, still in the silk pajamas she'd ordered online last week with money we didn't have. Her hair was perfect, her makeup was perfect, and her expression was colder than a Chicago winter. She looked like she'd been up for hours, which was weird because the woman usually needed at least 2 cups of coffee and a motivational speech just to remember her own name in the morning. "Morning," I said, trying to keep things light. "You guys are up early. Everything okay?" That's when they both turned to look at me, and I felt something twist in my gut. You know that feeling you get right before you're about to get fired, or dumped, or told you've got 6 months to live? That sick, anticipatory dread that starts in your stomach and spreads through your whole body like poison? Yeah, that. Marcus didn't say anything, just stood there with that smug little smirk he'd been wearing since Tuesday night. But Clarissa, Jesus, the look she gave me could have frozen hell over. It was like she was seeing me for the first time and finding me lacking in every possible way. "We need to talk," she said, and those 4 words hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. "Okay," I said slowly, glancing between her and her brother. "Should Marcus maybe?" "Marcus is staying," she cut me off. "He's helping me handle some things." "Handle some things. Not us handling some things. Now we need to handle some things." Her handling some things, with her brother's help. I was already being written out of the story, and I was too stupid to see it. We went into the bedroom, our bedroom, though I was starting to get the feeling it wasn't going to be ours much longer. Clarissa stood in the doorway like she was afraid to get too close to me, while Marcus lurked behind her like some kind of designer wearing gargoyle. The whole setup felt rehearsed, like they'd been practicing this moment. "Darian," Clarissa started, and I could hear her voice shaking just a little. Not with emotion, though, with adrenaline. She was nervous, but not because she was about to break my heart. She was nervous because she was about to do something that required balls, and she'd never been particularly well equipped in that department. "I need you to leave," she continued, the words coming out in a rush like she was afraid she'd lose her nerve if she didn't get them all out at once. I blinked. "Leave? Like, leave the apartment? Are we going somewhere?" Marcus snorted, and Clarissa shot him a look that shut him up. For about 2 seconds. "No, Darian," she said, and now her voice was steadier, colder. "I need you to disappear. Vanish from the face of the earth. I don't care where you go or what you do, but I need you gone." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I actually took a step backward, like her voice had physical force behind it. "What the hell are you talking about, Clarissa? Are you having some kind of breakdown?" "You're useless now," she said, and Jesus Christ, the casual way she said it was somehow worse than if she'd screamed it. Like it was just a fact, as obvious as saying the sky was blue or water was wet. "I have money. Real money. I don't need you to pay the bills or fix the car or pretend like you're some kind of provider. I can hire people to do all of that, and they'll do it better than you ever could." I felt like I'd been sucker punched. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of working my ass off to keep us afloat, 7 years of believing that we were a team, and she was dismissing all of it like I'd been nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. "This is insane," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "Clarissa, this is our money. We won this together. We're married, for Christ's sake." That's when Marcus decided to chime in. "Actually, bro," he said, drawing out the word bro like it tasted bad in his mouth. "Clarissa bought the ticket. Clarissa picked the numbers. Clarissa's name is on all the paperwork. Far as I can see, this is her money." I stared at him, then at her. "Are you serious right now? Are you actually serious?" Clarissa reached into her purse, the new Louis Vuitton one she'd bought online yesterday with money from our joint account, and pulled out a wad of cash. She tossed it onto the bed like she was tipping a bellhop, and I watched the bills scatter across our comforter like confetti at the world's most depressing party. $500, she said. "That should last you until you figure out your next move. $500. For 7 years of marriage." For all those double shifts, all those nights I came home exhausted and covered in motor oil while she complained about being bored. For every time I chose to fix something myself instead of hiring someone because we couldn't afford it. For every sacrifice I'd made to keep us going. $500 fucking. Marcus was laughing now, not even trying to hide it anymore. "Come on, Clarissa. Don't be cruel. Give the man $1,000. He's been a good little worker bee. That's when something inside me snapped. You piece of shit, I said, taking a step toward him. You think this is funny? Marcus straightened up, and for a second I thought he might actually try to throw hands. But Clarissa stepped between us, and the look on her face stopped me cold. Don't, she said quietly. Just don't. Take the money and go, Darian. Make this easy on both of us. Easy on both of us. Like I was the one making things difficult by existing in my own goddamn marriage. I looked at her for a long moment, searching her face for any sign of the woman I'd married. The woman who used to steal fries off my plate and laugh at my terrible jokes. The woman who cried during Hallmark commercials and made me watch romantic comedies even though we both knew I hated them. The woman who used to tell me I was her best friend, her partner, her everything. She was gone. Maybe she'd been gone for a while, and I'd just been too blind to see it. Maybe she'd never really been there at all, and I'd just been in love with the idea of her. Either way, the person standing in front of me was a stranger wearing my wife's face. 7 years, I said finally. 7 goddamn years, Clarissa. I know, she said, and for just a second, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or guilt. But then it was gone, replaced by that cold, calculating look she'd been wearing all morning. But that's over now. I nodded slowly, because what else was I supposed to do? Fight for a woman who'd already written me off? Beg someone who saw me as useless to let me stick around? Fuck that. I had more pride than that. Not much more, but enough. I started packing while they watched from the doorway. 2 suitcases and a shoebox of photos. That's what 7 years of marriage boiled down to. Pictures of my parents before the car crash that took them both when I was 22. Photos of Clarissa and me from better times, when she still smiled at me instead of through me. A picture of Richard Hayes, the landlord I'd worked for briefly before the auto shop, shaking my hand after I'd fixed his tenant's plumbing emergency. Darian, you're a good man, he'd told me that day. I'd believed him then. I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. When I zipped up the last suitcase, I turned around to find Clarissa still standing there. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it again. Marcus had disappeared, probably off to celebrate his sister's newfound fortune and single status. Clarissa, I started, but she shook her head. Just go, Darian. Please. So I did. I picked up my 2 suitcases and my shoebox of memories, left the $500 scattered on the bed like the insult it was, and walked out of the apartment I'd been paying for since we moved in together. She didn't follow me. I kept expecting to hear footsteps behind me, to hear her voice calling my name, to hear some sign that maybe she'd realized what she was throwing away. But the only sound was the echo of my footsteps in the hallway and the distant hum of traffic outside. 7 years, gone in a sentence. And the worst part? I was starting to think she'd been planning this longer than I wanted to admit. The Sunrise Motel was about as far from actual sunrise as you could get without traveling to the dark side of the moon. The neon sign flickered like it was having a seizure, missing half the letters so it read Sun ISEMOL in sickly pink light that made everything look like it was dying of some exotic disease. The parking lot was cracked asphalt held together by weeds and broken dreams, populated by cars that had seen better decades and a few that looked like they'd been abandoned since the Clinton administration. $45 a night, cash only, no questions asked. That was the deal Ralph offered when I dragged my sorry ass through the door at 11:30 p.m., looking like something the cat had dragged in and then rejected for being too pathetic. Ralph was the kind of guy who'd probably seen every sob story in the book twice and had stopped caring somewhere around the Bush presidency. The first one. How long you staying? He asked without looking up from his newspaper, an actual physical newspaper, like we were living in 1995. The sports section was open, and I could see he was checking lottery numbers. Because apparently, everyone in this goddamn city was obsessed with winning money they didn't deserve. Not sure, I said, sliding 2 20s and a 5 across the counter. Probably just a few days while I figure things out. Ralph glanced at me then, taking in the wrinkled clothes, the 2 mismatched suitcases, and the general aura of a man whose life had just exploded in his face. He'd seen this movie before. Room 14, he said, handing me a key attached to a plastic diamond that probably cost less than the gas I'd used driving here. Checkout's at 11. Ice machine's busted, vending machine eats quarters, and if you hear screaming from room 12, don't worry about it. Margie just has nightmares. Great. A haunted motel room next to a woman with PTSD. This day just kept getting better. Room 14 was exactly what you'd expect from a place that charged $45 and probably hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. The wallpaper was peeling in strips that looked like dead skin, revealing patches of drywall underneath that were stained with God knows what. The carpet was brown. Not originally, I suspected, but life had a way of making everything brown eventually. It squished slightly under my feet, and I decided I really didn't want to know why. The bed dominated the room like a saga monument to every broken promise ever made. The mattress had a depression in the middle that suggested the last guest had been roughly the size and weight of a small elephant, and the comforter was one of those generic motel patterns designed to hide stains while simultaneously creating new ones. I sat down on the edge and immediately sank about 6 inches, like the bed was trying to swallow me alive. Which, honestly, didn't sound like the worst option at that point. The bathroom was a masterpiece of despair. The shower had more mold than a college dorm room. The toilet rocked when you sat on it, and the mirror was cracked in a spider web pattern that made my reflection look like a cubist painting of depression. I splashed some water on my face and immediately regretted it when I realized the water smelled like sulfur and had a slight brown tint. I lay back on the bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling where someone had thoughtfully carved, "Life sucks, and then you die," into the acoustic tiles. Probably with a butter knife, judging by the jagged edges. Inspiring stuff. Really set the mood for what was turning out to be the longest night of my life. The walls in this place were about as thick as tissue paper, so I got to enjoy the full surround sound experience of my fellow guests' personal dramas. To my left, some couple was having the kind of fight that starts with accusations about who forgot to buy milk and ends with someone threatening to burn down everything the other person holds dear. To my right, someone was watching what sounded like a game show at full volume, with occasional bursts of applause and some host with an annoyingly cheerful voice asking contestants to come on down. And above me, someone was apparently practicing for the World Bowling Championship using furniture instead of bowling balls. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine Clarissa in whatever 5-star hotel she'd probably booked by now. Probably ordering room service champagne and laughing with Marcus about how easy it had been to get rid of me. Maybe she was already planning her new life. The mansions Eleanor had been talking about, the yachts, the European vacations. Maybe she was on the phone with some real estate agent, describing her dream house without any mention of the husband who'd made it all possible. The husband she'd called useless. That word kept bouncing around my skull like a pinball, hitting every insecurity I'd ever had and lighting them up like a Christmas tree. Useless. After 7 years of working my ass off to keep us afloat, after all those double shifts and side jobs and nights spent fixing everything in our apartment because we couldn't afford to hire someone else. After choosing her happiness over mine so many times I'd forgotten what mine even looked like. Useless. Maybe she was right. What good was I, really? I fixed cars for a living. Not exactly a glamorous profession. I didn't have a college degree, didn't speak multiple languages, didn't know the difference between good wine and the stuff that came in a box. I was just some blue-collar schmuck who'd gotten lucky enough to marry up, and now that she didn't need me to pay the bills, what was the point of keeping me around? My phone buzzed. For a split second, my heart jumped, thinking maybe it was Clarissa calling to apologize, to say she'd made a mistake, to ask me to come home. But it was just a notification from our bank. Sorry, her bank now, letting me know that our joint account had been closed and a new account opened in her name only. Efficient. I had to give her credit for that. I turned off the phone and tossed it onto the nightstand, where it landed next to a Bible that looked like it had been through a war and a laminated card advertising discreet companionship with a phone number that had been partially scratched out. The Bible's pages were yellowed and dog-eared, like a lot of desperate people had been looking for answers in this room over the years. I wondered if any of them had found what they were looking for. The couple next door had moved on from accusations about milk to accusations about infidelity, their voices rising and falling like some twisted opera. The woman was crying now, big sobbing wails that cut through the thin walls like knives. The man was shouting back, his voice slurred with alcohol or exhaustion or both. I found myself listening despite myself, caught up in their drama because it was easier than dealing with my own. At least they were fighting. At least they still cared enough to scream at each other. Clarissa hadn't even bothered to raise her voice when she destroyed my life. She delivered the news like she was reading the weather report, calm, cool, and completely detached from the devastation she was causing. That's when something started gnawing at me. A tiny voice in the back of my head that refused to be silenced by self-pity and cheap motel despair. Something about the whole situation didn't add up. Not the lottery win itself. That was real enough. I'd seen the numbers with my own eyes. But something about the way Clarissa and Marcus had handled everything afterward. The whispering, the secrecy, the rushed timeline. Clarissa had never been one for reading fine print. Hell, the woman couldn't be bothered to read the instructions on a frozen dinner, let alone the terms and conditions on a multi-million-dollar lottery ticket. She was the type who clicked "I agree" without scrolling through anything, who signed contracts without reading them, who bought extended warranties on everything because the salesperson smiled at her. But she'd been waving that ticket around like she owned the world, talking about claiming the money like it was already hers. Never once mentioning terms, conditions, or legal requirements. Never once suggesting we should read through the paperwork together or consult a lawyer about the best way to handle things. Marcus, on the other hand, had shown up awfully fast after her Instagram post. And he'd been whispering in her ear ever since, filling her head with ideas about lawyers and legal stuff and changes. What kind of changes? And why was he so interested in helping his sister suddenly? The same Marcus who'd borrowed $300 from us last Christmas and never paid it back, who only called when he needed something, who'd spent most of our wedding reception hitting on the bridesmaids. I sat up on the Saga mattress, ignoring the way it creaked like a haunted house. That spark of suspicion was growing brighter, cutting through the fog of heartbreak and self-doubt like a lighthouse in a storm. Maybe I was grasping at straws. Maybe I was just looking for some way to make sense of how quickly my life had fallen apart. But something felt wrong about the whole thing. Really wrong. And if there's one thing 7 years of fixing cars had taught me, it's that when something feels wrong, it usually is. You learn to trust that feeling when you're dealing with machinery. That little voice that tells you the engine sounds off, that the brakes feel spongy, that something's not right even when everything looks fine on the surface. Right now, that voice was screaming. I grabbed my phone and turned it back on, ignoring the 17 new notifications from apps I didn't care about. The Lottery Commission had a website. They had rules, regulations, fine print that nobody ever bothered to read. If I was going to spend the night in this hellhole anyway, I might as well do something productive with my insomnia. Outside, the neon sign flickered again, casting pink shadows across the walls like some kind of diseased aurora borealis. The couple next door had finally exhausted themselves, their fight dissolving into the kind of angry silence that's somehow worse than screaming. The game show host was still cheerfully encouraging people to make terrible decisions for money. And I was about to start reading lottery regulations like my life depended on it. Because maybe, just maybe, it did. The next morning, I woke up in that godforsaken motel room feeling like I'd been hit by a truck driven by my own stupidity, then backed over for good measure. My neck was twisted into some kind of pretzel shape from sleeping on what I can only assume was a mattress stuffed with broken dreams and concrete blocks. But for the first time since Tuesday night, I had something resembling a plan. And let me tell you, having a plan when you're living in a place that charges by the hour feels like finding a $20 bill in your old jeans. I counted the crumpled bills in my wallet, $37 and change, which was just enough to get me downtown and maybe grab a cup of coffee that didn't taste like it had been filtered through a gym sock. The bus fare was $2.50 each way, which left me with about $32 to work with. Living large, baby. The ride downtown took 45 minutes through the armpit of the city, past pawn shops and payday loan places and billboards advertising personal injury lawyers with names like Hurt, call Bert. Real classy stuff. I sat in the back, trying not to think about how I'd gone from having a wife and a home to riding public transportation with my worldly possessions stuffed into a backpack that had seen better decades. The State Lottery Commission building was exactly what you'd expect from a government office that dealt with people's dreams on a daily basis. All glass and chrome, and the kind of sterile corporate aesthetic that said, "We take your money very seriously, but we'd rather not deal with you personally." It was the kind of place where hope went to get processed through bureaucratic machinery and came out the other side as tax revenue. I walked through the automatic doors into a lobby that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd never experienced joy and wanted to make sure nobody else did either. Everything was white and gray and beige, the kind of color scheme that made you want to check your pulse to make sure you were still alive. There were motivational posters on the walls featuring happy families holding oversized checks, which felt like a particularly cruel joke given my current circumstances. The receptionist looked like she'd been sitting behind that desk since the lottery was invented, wearing the kind of smile that came with her paycheck and disappeared the moment she clocked out. Her nameplate said, Brenda, and Brenda looked like she'd rather be literally anywhere else doing literally anything else. Can I help you? She asked in the tone of someone who really hoped the answer was no. I need to see someone about a lottery claim, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. My wife won $73 million. Brenda's expression didn't change, which told me she'd heard every sob story in the book and had stopped caring somewhere around the Carter administration. Congratulations. Do you have your claim number? That's the thing, I said, feeling sweat start to gather under my arms despite the Arctic air conditioning. I don't think she filed it correctly. We're married, and I think there might be some legal issues with how she handled the paperwork. Now that got Brenda's attention. She looked up from her computer screen and really saw me for the first time. The rumpled clothes, the desperate expression, the general aura of a man who'd been sleeping in a place that rented rooms by the hour. What kind of legal issues? She asked, and I could hear the wheels turning in her head. This was either going to be entertaining or a complete waste of her time, and she was trying to figure out which. Marriage law stuff, I said, because honestly, I wasn't entirely sure what kind of legal issues they might be. I just knew that something felt wrong about the whole situation, and I was hoping someone smarter than me could figure out what. Brenda stared at me for a long moment, then picked up her phone. Charles, I've got someone down here you might want to talk to. Says his wife filed a lottery claim incorrectly. She paused, listening. Yeah, he looks exactly like what you'd expect. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in an elevator that played the kind of music that made you question your life choices, heading up to the legal department. The doors opened on the 7th floor, and I found myself face to face with a hallway lined with offices where people in expensive suits made more money in a month than I'd made in the past year. Charles Whitmore's office was at the end of the hall, behind a door that had his name etched in gold letters that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The man himself was exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd clawed his way to the top of the government food chain. Silver hair that looked like it had been styled by angels, a suit that probably cost more than my car, and eyes that had seen every scheme, scam, and sob story in the book. He was on the phone when I knocked, gesturing for me to sit down while he finished what sounded like a conversation about tax implications and investment strategies. I sat in a chair that was more comfortable than my bed at the motel and tried not to look like I was about to steal something. So, Charles said when he hung up, leaning back in his chair and studying me like I was a particularly interesting specimen in a jar. Brenda tells me you think your wife made some mistakes on her lottery claim. Maybe, I said, because suddenly I felt like an idiot for being there. I don't know. Something doesn't feel right about the whole thing. Charles laughed. Not a mean laugh, but the kind of laugh that suggested he'd heard this exact story more times than he could count. Let me guess. Your wife won the lottery, decided she didn't need you anymore, and kicked you out. Now you're hoping there's some legal loophole that'll get you back in the game. I felt my face burning. It's not like that, isn't it? Charles asked, but his tone wasn't cruel. If anything, he sounded almost sympathetic. How long have you been married? 7 years. Kids? No. Joint bank accounts? Yeah. I mean, we did. She cleaned them out. Charles nodded like he was checking boxes on some internal list. And when did she file the claim? I don't know exactly. Sometime in the past few days, I guess. She kicked me out Wednesday morning, and by then she was already talking about mansions and yachts like the money was already in the bank. That's when Charles's expression changed. The amused, seen it all look disappeared, replaced by something sharper, more focused. He leaned forward in his chair, suddenly very interested in what I had to say. She kicked you out Wednesday morning, he repeated slowly. And she was already talking about the money being available? Yeah. She and her brother were making all these plans, talking about financial advisors and property managers and all this stuff like they'd already figured out how to access the money. Charles was quiet for a long moment, just staring at me with those sharp lawyer eyes. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder that looked like it could choke a horse. "Did you ever read the terms and conditions for the lottery?" he asked. "No. I mean, Clarissa bought the tickets. I never really paid attention to that stuff." Charles slid the folder across the desk toward me. "You should have." I opened the folder and immediately felt like I was drowning in legal jargon. Pages and pages of tiny print that talked about everything from tax obligations to claim procedures to residency requirements. But Charles reached over and flipped to a specific page, pointing to a section that was highlighted in yellow. "Read that," he said. I squinted at the text, trying to make sense of the legal language. And there, buried in a paragraph that would have put a philosophy professor to sleep, was a sentence that made my heart start pounding like a bass drum at a rock concert. Any prize over $50 million must be claimed jointly by spouses unless legally separated prior to the draw date. I read out loud, my voice barely above a whisper. Charles nodded. "That's right. Joint claim. Both spouses have to sign off on it. Both spouses are entitled to equal shares, and both spouses are equally responsible for taxes and legal obligations." I stared at him, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. So if she filed the claim without me, then she committed fraud, Charles finished. Federal fraud, to be specific. The kind that comes with prison time and massive financial penalties. I felt like someone had just told me I'd won the lottery all over again. Except this time it was even better because this time it came with a side order of justice served ice cold. But she already filed. The money's already. "The money isn't going anywhere," Charles interrupted. "Claims this large don't get processed overnight. There are background checks, verification procedures, waiting periods. The earliest she could see a dime would be 6 weeks from the filing date, and that's if everything was filed correctly. Which, based on what you're telling me, it wasn't." He picked up his phone and dialed an extension. "Maria? I need you to pull the file on the Monroe claim. $73 million jackpot from Tuesday night." He paused, listening. "Yes, that one. Bring it to my office." He hung up and looked at me with something that might have been respect. "You might be smarter than you look." "I'm definitely prettier," I said, which earned me another laugh. "We'll see about that when we're done with your wife." Maria turned out to be a paralegal who looked like she could bench press a filing cabinet and enjoyed every minute of her job. She brought in another folder, this one even thicker than the first, and spread the contents across Charles's desk like she was dealing cards at the world's most expensive poker game. "Monroe, Clarissa," Maria said, consulting her notes. "Filed Wednesday morning. Claimed single status. Listed no dependents or joint financial obligations." Charles looked at me. "Were you married on Tuesday night when the drawing took place?" "Yeah. Still am, technically." "Joint financial obligations? Joint bank accounts, shared property, anything like that?" "Everything. The apartment lease is in both our names. We've had joint checking and savings accounts for 5 years. She's on my health insurance. I'm the beneficiary on her life insurance policy. We're about as legally entangled as two people can get." Charles and Maria exchanged a look that made me think of sharks smelling blood in the water. "Maria," Charles said slowly, "please tell me you have surveillance footage of Ms. Monroe filing her claim." Maria grinned like Christmas had come early. Full HD video, complete with audio. She was very emphatic about being single and having no financial obligations to anyone else. I felt something that might have been hope blooming in my chest for the first time since Tuesday night. "So what does this mean?" Charles leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers like a movie villain who'd just realized his master plan was coming together. "It means, my friend, that your wife has just handed you the biggest gift of your life. She's committed lottery fraud, perjury, and probably half a dozen other federal crimes I haven't even thought of yet. And that means you don't just have rights to half that money. You have power, real power, the kind that comes with being able to send someone to federal prison for the next decade." I sat there for a moment, letting that sink in. Clarissa had called me useless. She'd thrown me away like yesterday's garbage, confident that her $73 million made her untouchable. She was about to learn just how wrong she could be. "So what's our next move?" I asked. Charles smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made me glad he was on my side. "We're going to introduce your wife to the concept of consequences. And if we do this right, she's going to lose everything she tried to steal." For the first time in 4 days, I felt like I could breathe again. Turns out sometimes the people who think they're untouchable are just setting themselves up for a longer fall. Charles wasn't done dropping bombshells on me, which was good because I was starting to develop a taste for having my entire worldview rearranged every few minutes. He picked up his phone again and dialed another extension, this time with the kind of grin that suggested he was about to introduce me to someone who would either save my life or scare me into an early grave. "Rosa? You busy?" he said into the phone, leaning back in his leather chair like a man who was thoroughly enjoying his work. "I've got a case that's right up your alley. Lottery fraud, arrogant spouse, probably some money laundering thrown in for good measure." He paused, listening to whatever Rosa was saying on the other end. "Yeah, it's exactly as entertaining as it sounds. Can you come up here?" He hung up and looked at me with the expression of a man who'd just called in the cavalry. "You're about to meet Rosa Delgado, the best private investigator in the state and probably the smartest person in this building. She specializes in financial fraud cases, and she has a particular fondness for taking down people who think they're too clever to get caught." "Is she expensive?" I asked, because let's face it, my current net worth was somewhere in the neighborhood of $32 and a half-eaten pack of gum. "She works on contingency for cases like this," Charles said, "which means she doesn't get paid unless we win. And trust me, Rosa doesn't take cases she can't win." 5 minutes later, the door opened, and in walked a woman who looked like she could arm wrestle a grizzly bear and win by submission. Rosa Delgado was maybe 5'6" in her sensible shoes, but she carried herself like someone who'd never met a problem she couldn't solve with the right combination of brains, persistence, and sheer bloody-minded determination. Her handshake could have cracked walnuts, and her eyes had the kind of sharp intelligence that made me feel like she was reading my entire life story just by looking at me. "So you're the poor bastard whose wife tried to steal $73 million, she said by way of introduction, settling into the chair next to mine like she owned the place. "Charles, fill me in on the basics." "Your wife's an idiot. Her brother's probably the brains of the operation, and they think they're smarter than the legal system." "Did I miss anything?" "Her mother's involved too," I said. "Eleanor Monroe. She showed up the night we won, already making plans like she was going to be managing the money." Rosa's eyes lit up like I'd just told her Christmas was coming early this year. "A family conspiracy. Even better. The more people involved, the more mistakes they make, and the easier it is to prove intent to defraud." She pulled out a tablet and started typing notes with the speed of someone who'd been doing this for a very long time. "Tell me everything about Tuesday night. Every detail, every conversation, every look that seemed off. People always think they're being subtle when they're planning to screw someone over, but they're usually about as subtle as a brick through a window." So I told her everything. The lottery drawing, Clarissa's reaction, Marcus showing up like he'd been waiting for the call, Eleanor arriving in her pearls and perfume, and immediately taking charge of our financial future. The whispered conversations, the way Marcus kept smirking at me, the way Clarissa started talking about her money instead of our money almost immediately. Rosa listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making notes, but mostly just absorbing everything I said like a sponge soaking up water. When I finished, she sat back and looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. "Your wife's been planning this for a while," she said matter-of-factly. "The logistics alone, knowing who to call, what forms to file, how to structure the claim to exclude you, that's not something you figure out in 3 days. She's been thinking about this scenario, probably for months." That hit me like a punch to the gut, because it meant Clarissa hadn't just been waiting for an excuse to leave me. She'd been actively planning for it, fantasizing about a future where I didn't exist. Every time she bought a lottery ticket, she'd been imagining what she'd do when she won, and apparently, what she'd do was throw away 7 years of marriage like it had never happened. "The good news," Rosa continued, "is that arrogant people make stupid mistakes, and your wife seems to have cornered the market on both arrogance and stupidity. Charles showed you the legal requirements for joint claims." "Yeah, she had to file jointly, and she didn't. Right? But that's just the beginning. If she really filed a false claim, if she really stated she was single and had no financial obligations, then she didn't just break lottery rules. She committed perjury on a federal document, which is a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison. And if she tries to access that money based on false information, that's wire fraud, which can get you 20 years. Charles leaned forward. "The question is proving intent. We need to show that she knew she was lying when she filed the claim, not that she just made an honest mistake. Oh, that's the easy part, Rosa said with a grin that would have made a shark nervous. Give me 48 hours, and I'll have enough evidence to bury her in court documents. These people always think they're the first ones to come up with these schemes, but they never are, and they never learn from other people's mistakes. She stood up and started pacing around the office like a general planning a military campaign. First, I'm going to pull all the surveillance footage from the Lottery Commission. Every camera, every angle, every second of your wife filing her claim. If she looked nervous, if she hesitated when answering questions, if she had coaching materials with her, I'll find it. What kind of coaching materials? I asked. Notes, printouts of legal advice, text messages with instructions from her brother. Trust me, amateurs always leave a paper trail. They can't help themselves. She made another note on her tablet. Second, I'm going to pull her bank records for the past 6 months. If she's been planning this, there will be evidence. Payments to lawyers, research into lottery law, maybe even practice runs with smaller amounts. Charles nodded approvingly. What about the brother and mother? Oh, they're next on my list. Marcus Monroe has a business degree but no visible means of income, which tells me he's either trust fund trash or he's working angles that won't look good under scrutiny. And Eleanor Monroe. Rosa paused to check something on her tablet. Eleanor Monroe has a history of litigation against family members. 3 separate inheritance disputes in the past 10 years, all settled out of court. She's got a pattern of trying to manipulate family money, and patterns are exactly what prosecutors love to see. I felt like I was watching a master class in how to destroy someone's life in the most legally satisfying way possible. How long will all this take? The initial investigation? Like I said, 48 hours for the basics. But here's the thing. We don't want to just prove she committed fraud. We want to prove she committed fraud while also being stupid enough to leave evidence everywhere. The more evidence we have, the stronger our position when it comes time to negotiate. Negotiate what? I asked. Charles and Rosa exchanged a look that made me think of wolves deciding how to divide up a particularly juicy deer. Your wife stole $73 million, Charles said. But fraud cases can tie up assets for years while they work their way through the court system. If we play this right, we can get her to agree to a settlement that gives you everything you're entitled to plus damages, in exchange for not pursuing criminal charges that could send her to federal prison. So I get the money and she stays out of jail? If she's smart, yes. If she's stupid, Rosa shrugged. Well, federal prison food isn't that bad, I hear. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and felt my blood pressure spike about 50 points. It was from an unknown number, but the message was clear enough. Saw the news about your lottery win. When can we expect to see you and your beautiful wife on TV for the winner's interview? I showed the message to Charles and Rosa. Rosa read it and started laughing. Not a pleasant laugh, but the kind of laugh that suggested someone was about to have a very bad day. Your wife's been doing interviews? She asked. I don't know. I've been staying at a motel, trying to avoid reporters. Rosa was already typing on her tablet. Let's see what the internet has to say about Clarissa Monroe, lottery winner. Her fingers flew across the screen for about 30 seconds. Then she stopped and grinned like she'd just found buried treasure. Oh, this is even better than I hoped. She turned the tablet around so Charles and I could see the screen. There was Clarissa, standing in front of our apartment building, being interviewed by a local news crew. She was wearing the new outfit she'd bought online, probably with money from our joint account, and holding up the winning lottery ticket like it was the Declaration of Independence. I've always believed that hard work and positive thinking pay off, she was saying to the reporter, with the kind of sincere expression that actors spend years learning to fake. This money is going to change my life completely. I plan to travel, maybe start a business, really live the life I've always dreamed of. And what about your husband? The reporter asked. How is he handling this incredible stroke of luck? Clarissa's expression flickered for just a second, so fast you'd miss it if you weren't looking for it. But Rosa was looking for it, and she caught it like a baseball scout spotting a future Hall of Famer. I'm recently single, Clarissa said smoothly. This is really a fresh start for me in every way. Charles whistled low. She just lied on television about her marital status. In front of witnesses. While holding the lottery ticket, she fraudulently claimed. Gets better, Rosa said, still scrolling through the search results. Look at this. She'd found another interview, this one from yesterday, where Clarissa was talking about her plans to buy a mansion and start a charitable foundation. In this one, she specifically says she's been single for over a year and that this one validates her decision to focus on herself instead of supporting other people. I stared at the screen, watching my wife of 7 years tell the world that she'd been single for over a year, supporting other people. Like I was some kind of charity case she'd finally gotten tired of funding. Can we use this? I asked. Can we use this? Rosa repeated, looking at me like I'd just asked if water was wet. Darian, your wife just committed perjury on camera, in front of thousands of witnesses, while providing clear evidence of her intent to defraud the lottery system. This isn't just evidence. This is a prosecutor's wet dream. She stood up and started gathering her things. I'm going to get started on this right now. Charles, can you pull the original claim documents and get them copied for me? Already on it, Charles said, reaching for his phone. Rosa headed for the door, then stopped and turned back to me. Darian, I want you to do exactly what you've been doing. Stay at the motel, keep a low profile, don't contact your wife or her family. Let them think they've won. Let them get comfortable. The more confident they get, the more mistakes they'll make. And then, she grinned, and I finally understood why Charles had looked so pleased when he called her. And then we're going to teach your wife that stealing $73 million is easy. Keeping it when you've broken half a dozen federal laws in the process? That's the hard part. After she left, I sat in Charles's office for another hour, going over the legal implications of everything we'd discovered. By the time I left, my head was spinning with terms like criminal conspiracy and asset forfeiture and federal sentencing guidelines. But for the first time since Tuesday night, I felt like I wasn't fighting this battle alone. Clarissa had called me useless, but she'd forgotten one important thing. Sometimes the people you throw away know exactly where all the bodies are buried. And sometimes, they're friends with people who know how to dig them up. 5 days. That's how long it took for Clarissa to go from kicking me out of our crappy apartment to living like some kind of discount royalty in a mansion that probably cost more per month than I'd made in the past year. Rosa had been tracking her every move through social media, bank records, and what I can only describe as professional-grade stalking, so I knew exactly where to find her when Charles finally gave me the green light. The house was in Belmont Hills, the kind of neighborhood where people had names like Thurston and Muffy, and thought poor people were just rich people who weren't trying hard enough. It was one of those modern monstrosities with more glass than a greenhouse and enough marble to supply a small cemetery. The kind of place that screamed, I have money and I want everyone to know it, in architectural form. I stood at the front door holding Charles's injunction in one hand and a set of keys in the other. Keys that had been issued by court order after Rosa's investigation had turned up enough evidence to choke a horse. My heart was pounding like I'd just run a marathon, but for the first time in a week, it wasn't from despair. It was from anticipation. The doorbell played some kind of classical music that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Through the glass, I could see Clarissa pacing around what looked like a living room the size of a basketball court, gesticulating wildly while talking on her phone. She was wearing clothes I'd never seen before, designer stuff that probably cost more than my car. When she saw me through the glass, her face went through about 6 different expressions in 2 seconds flat. Surprise, confusion, anger, and finally settling on the kind of rage usually reserved for people who'd just been told their favorite TV show had been canceled. She yanked open the door so hard I thought she might pull it off its hinges. What the hell are you doing here, Darian? Living in my house, I said, pushing past her into the foyer that was roughly the size of our old apartment. She followed me, sputtering like a broken lawn sprinkler. Your house? Are you insane? This is my house. I'm renting it with my money. Actually, I said, pulling out the injunction, according to this court order, it's our house. Rented with our money. You know, the money you try to steal from me. The phone call she'd been having apparently involved screaming at some jeweler about a custom necklace, because I could hear a tiny voice on the other end saying something about payment processing issues and declined transactions. That's when it happened. The beautiful, perfect moment I'd been waiting for all week. I'm sorry, ma'am. The voice on the phone said, loud enough for me to hear, but your credit card has been declined. All of your credit cards, actually, and your bank accounts appear to be frozen. Clarissa's face went through the color spectrum like a mood ring having a seizure. Red to white to green, and back to red again. She looked at her phone like it had just told her the world was ending. "You're lying," she whispered into the phone. "Check again. Check all of them." But I was already opening the folder Charles had given me, pulling out copies of the court orders that had frozen her accounts, her credit lines, and basically every financial resource she thought she had access to. Rosa had been busy, little b, and her investigation had given the court everything they needed to lock down Clarissa's fraudulent empire faster than you could say federal crime. "Clarissa," I said, trying to keep my voice level even though I wanted to do a victory dance on her marble floors, "we need to talk." She hung up the phone and turned to look at me with the kind of expression you'd see on someone who'd just realized they were standing in a minefield. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," I said, which was technically true. "You did this all by yourself when you decided to commit lottery fraud." That's when she started laughing. Not the good kind of laughing, but the kind that suggested someone had finally snapped and was now operating on pure panic and desperation. "Lottery fraud? Are you out of your mind? I won that money fair and square. Those are my numbers, my ticket, Our ticket," I interrupted. "Our numbers. Our money. We were married when you bought that ticket, Clarissa. Legally married. Which means legally, half of everything belongs to me." I opened the folder and pulled out the paperwork that would change both our lives forever. Copies of her claim forms where she'd sworn under penalty of perjury that she was single. Screenshots of her Instagram posts bragging about her single life and my lottery winnings. Bank records showing her attempts to move money into accounts I had no access to. "You signed documents stating you were single," I said, laying them out on her fancy glass coffee table like I was dealing cards. "You lied to federal officials about your marital status. You tried to defraud me out of my legal share of the winnings." Her hands were shaking so badly now that she couldn't hold the paper steady. She kept looking from the documents to me and back again, like she was trying to solve a puzzle that was missing half its pieces. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is my money. I bought the ticket. I picked the numbers. You committed fraud," I said. "Federal fraud. The kind that comes with prison time." That's when Eleanor's voice cut through the air like a chainsaw through butter. "What is all this noise about?" Clarissa's mother swept into the room wearing the kind of outfit that probably cost more than most people made in a month, her pearls clicking together like a rosary made of arrogance. She took one look at me standing in her daughter's stolen mansion, and her expression could have frozen hell over. "You," she said, pointing at me like I was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. "What are you doing in my daughter's home?" "Reading her the charges," I said, holding up the last document in the folder. "Would you like to hear them? Lottery fraud, perjury, attempted money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud. The list goes on." Eleanor's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the fact that all the color had just drained out of her face. She looked at Clarissa, then at the papers scattered across the table, then back at me. "This is ridiculous," she said, but her voice lacked its usual commanding tone. "You can't just come in here and—" "Actually, I can," I said, pulling out the keys. "Court order. This house, these accounts, all of it is frozen until the investigation is complete. And since I'm the legal co-owner of the lottery winnings, I have every right to be here." I looked around the room at the expensive furniture, the artwork that probably cost more than I'd made in the past 5 years, the champagne glasses still sitting on the counter from whatever celebration they'd been having before I arrived. "Nice place you've got here," I said. "Too bad it's all paid for with stolen money." For the first time since I'd walked through that door, Clarissa was completely speechless. And for the first time in a week, I felt like I could breathe again. 2 nights later, I was sitting in what used to be Clarissa's stolen mansion, drinking what used to be her overpriced scotch, and reading what used to be her copies of Architectural Digest, when the front door burst open like someone was staging a home invasion. The sound of Eleanor's heels clicking across the marble foyer was like machine gun fire, and I knew I was about to have the conversation I'd been both dreading and looking forward to since this whole mess started. Eleanor Monroe swept into the living room like a one-woman hurricane, her pearls rattling with barely contained fury and her perfume arriving a full 5 seconds before she did. Behind her, Clarissa skulked like a scolded teenager who'd been caught shoplifting and was hoping her mommy could make all the bad consequences go away. "You," Eleanor said, pointing one perfectly manicured finger at me like she was casting a curse, "are going to fix this situation immediately." I looked up from my magazine. An article about sustainable kitchen designs that cost more than most people's cars, and tried not to smile. The past 48 hours had been a masterclass in watching privileged people discover that money couldn't actually solve every problem, especially when that money had been obtained through federal crimes. "Evening, Eleanor," I said, taking a sip of scotch that probably cost more per ounce than I used to make per hour. "Nice to see you too. Can I offer you a drink? I'm afraid it's your daughter's scotch, but since it was purchased with stolen money, I figure it's community property now." Eleanor's face went through several interesting color changes. "How dare you speak to me that way? Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? A woman whose daughter is facing federal fraud charges?" I suggested. "A woman who was present during the planning stages of said fraud? A woman who might want to start thinking about hiring a good criminal defense attorney." That got her attention. Eleanor had always been the kind of person who thought rules were suggestions that applied to other people, but the word criminal seemed to penetrate even her titanium-plated sense of entitlement. Clarissa finally found her voice. "Mother, maybe we should." "Quiet," Eleanor snapped, not taking her eyes off me. "Adults are talking." She reached into her purse, a bag that probably cost more than I used to make in 3 months, and pulled out a checkbook bound in leather that looked like it had been harvested from unicorns. The kind of checkbook that belonged to people who paid for things like politicians and Supreme Court justices. $2 million, she said, placing the checkbook on the coffee table with the ceremony of someone laying down a royal flush. "To make this whole misunderstanding disappear." I looked at the checkbook, then at her, then back at the checkbook. "Misunderstanding? That's what this is," Eleanor said, her voice taking on the tone of someone explaining basic mathematics to a small child. "A misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion. Clarissa made some paperwork errors, you overreacted, and now we need to fix it before it becomes a real problem." I picked up the checkbook and opened it. The balance showed more zeros than I was comfortable counting. Old money. The kind of money that had been accumulating interest since before the Civil War and buying influence since before electricity was invented. $2 million, I said thoughtfully. "That's a lot of money, Eleanor." For the first time since she'd stormed in, she looked relieved. "It certainly is. More money than you've ever seen, I'd imagine. Enough to set you up for life, buy a nice house, maybe start that business you've always talked about." The problem was, I never talked about starting a business. Eleanor was making the classic rich person mistake of assuming that everyone else's dreams involved money, because money was the only thing she understood. I tore the check in half. Eleanor's mouth fell open like someone had just told her the stock market had been canceled. What are you doing?" "Rejecting your bribe," I said, dropping the pieces into the empty scotch glass. "Let me make this clear, Eleanor. Your daughter didn't make a paperwork error. She committed fraud. Federal fraud. The kind that comes with prison time and orange jumpsuits." Eleanor's hands were shaking as she wrote another check. $5 million, she said, her voice higher now, more desperate. $5 million to walk away and forget any of this ever happened. I took that check and tore it up too. The sound of expensive paper ripping seemed to echo through the room like thunder. "Are you insane?" Eleanor shrieked. "Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? Do you have any idea what you're trying to cover up?" I shot back. "Your daughter tried to steal $36.5 million from me. She lied to federal officials. She documented her crimes on social media like she was proud of them. And you think a few million in hush money is going to make that disappear?" That's when Eleanor's mask finally slipped completely. The polite, condescending tone disappeared, replaced by something uglier, more desperate, and infinitely more dangerous. "You stupid little man," she hissed, leaning forward like a snake preparing to strike. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. My family has connections in this city that go back generations. We have friends in government, friends in law enforcement, friends in places you can't even imagine." She stood up and began pacing around the room like a caged animal, her heels clicking against the marble with increasing agitation. "We can make your life disappear," she continued, her voice getting louder and more unhinged with each word. "Tax audits that go on for years. Building inspections that find violations you never knew existed. Background checks that discover irregularities in your employment history. We can bury you so deep in legal problems that you'll spend every penny of that lottery money just trying to stay out of prison. Clarissa was staring at her mother with something that might have been horror. Mother, maybe you shouldn't. Shouldn't what? Eleanor snapped. Shouldn't protect my family from this parasitic little gold digger who's trying to destroy our lives. She turned back to me, her eyes blazing with the kind of fury that comes from a lifetime of getting her way and suddenly discovering that the universe doesn't actually revolve around her bank account. That lottery money will rot in court for years before you ever see a penny of it, she snarled. We'll tie it up in litigation until you're too old to spend it. We'll challenge every document, question every signature, appeal every ruling. By the time we're done with you, the legal fees alone will bankrupt you. For a moment, just a moment, doubt crept into my mind. What if she was right? What if people with her kind of money and connections really could make the legal system work for them? What if I was just a naive working-class schmuck who'd stumbled into a game I didn't understand? But then I remembered Charles Whitmore's confident smile and Rosa Delgado's predatory grin. I remembered the stack of evidence they'd compiled, the surveillance footage, the social media posts, the financial records. Most importantly, I remembered the law, clear, ironclad, and completely on my side. You know what, Eleanor? I said, standing up and walking to the window that overlooked her daughter's stolen paradise. You're absolutely right about one thing. You do have friends in high places. The problem is, federal lottery fraud is prosecuted by the FBI, not your local buddies. I turned back to face her, and for the first time in this entire conversation, I felt completely calm. Charles Whitmore has been dealing with people like you for 30 years, I continued. Rosa Delgado has put millionaires in federal prison for less than what your daughter did. And the beautiful thing about federal court is that your country club connections don't mean shit when you're standing in front of a judge who's sworn to uphold the law. Eleanor's face had gone completely white under her expertly applied makeup. You're making a mistake, she said, but the fight had gone out of her voice. A terrible mistake. No, I said. Your daughter made the mistake. You made the mistake by trying to cover it up. And now you're both going to live with the consequences. I walked to the front door and held it open. I think it's time for you to leave, Eleanor. And don't bother coming back with another checkbook. The next time we see each other, it'll be in federal court. As they walked past me toward the door, Eleanor paused and looked at me one last time. You'll regret this, she said quietly. I promise you that. Maybe, I said, but not as much as your daughter's going to regret lying to the FBI. After they left, I poured myself another glass of scotch and sat back down in the living room that would probably be mine for the foreseeable future. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Eleanor Monroe had just threatened to destroy my life with her money and connections. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. Sometimes the people you think are powerless turn out to have the most powerful weapon of all, the truth. Rosa Delgado called me the next morning with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for people who'd just discovered buried treasure in their backyard. Darian, honey, please tell me you recorded that conversation with Eleanor last night. No, I said, immediately regretting every life choice that had led to that moment. Was I supposed to? Rosa's sigh was loud enough to wake the neighbors. Sweetie, if Eleanor Monroe threatened you the way I think she did, we just missed the biggest gift-wrapped piece of evidence since she started documenting her crimes on Instagram. That's when Charles Whitmore's voice came through the speaker. Apparently, they were tag-teaming this call like some kind of legal wrestling match. Don't worry about it, Darian. We're going to give them another chance to hang themselves. What do you mean? We're going to wire your living room, Charles said, like he was suggesting we order pizza. Professional-grade surveillance equipment, FBI-approved recording devices, the whole 9 yards. Then we're going to let Eleanor and Clarissa know you're ready to negotiate. The plan was so beautifully simple it felt like cheating. Rosa would coordinate with Agent Sylvia Martinez from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Apparently, Rosa had made some friends during her 12 years of putting rich assholes in federal prison. They'd set up surveillance equipment that could record a whispered confession from 3 rooms away, then sit back and wait for the Monroe family to come over and incriminate themselves. These people are arrogant enough to think they can threaten a federal witness in his own home, Rosa explained as she supervised the installation of equipment that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. We're just going to give them the rope and let them hang themselves with it. Agent Martinez turned out to be a woman who looked like she could interrogate terrorists before breakfast and enjoy every minute of it. She was maybe 40, with the kind of steady eyes that suggested she'd seen every type of criminal stupidity imaginable and had stopped being surprised by any of it. The beautiful thing about rich people, she said while testing microphone levels, is that they think money makes them untouchable. So when they get desperate, they get sloppy. And when they get sloppy, they say things that put them in federal prison for a very long time. The surveillance van was parked 3 houses down, disguised as a cable repair truck complete with magnetic signs, and a guy in coveralls who looked like he'd been fixing cable problems since the Reagan administration. Inside, Rosa and Agent Martinez would be monitoring every word, recording every threat, and building a case that would make Eleanor Monroe wish she'd stayed home and counted her money instead of trying to intimidate witnesses. Right on schedule, at exactly 7 p.m., Eleanor's Mercedes pulled into the driveway like a shark arriving for a feeding frenzy. Through the hidden cameras, I could see her in the passenger seat, gesticulating wildly, while Clarissa drove with the kind of white-knuckled grip that suggested she'd rather be literally anywhere else. They came to the door carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than my old car, and Eleanor was wearing the kind of expression that suggested she was about to negotiate the purchase of a small country. "Darian," Eleanor said when I opened the door, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "we need to talk." I led them into the living room, where hidden microphones were picking up every breath, every whisper, every incriminating word. Eleanor set the briefcase on the coffee table and opened it with the ceremony of someone revealing the Holy Grail. Inside were documents, legal papers, and what looked like enough cash to buy a decent house. Eleanor pulled out a thick folder and spread its contents across the table like she was dealing cards at the world's most expensive poker game. "These are tax documents," she said, pointing to papers that looked official enough to fool a casual observer. "Evidence of irregularities in your employment history. Proof that you've been defrauding the government for years." I stared at the papers, knowing that Rosa and Agent Martinez were listening to every word from their van down the street. "These are fake." "Are they?" Eleanor asked, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Try proving that in federal court while you're being audited by the IRS and investigated for tax evasion." Clarissa was sitting beside her mother like a scared child, occasionally glancing at the briefcase and then at me, like she couldn't decide whether to run or throw up. "Here's what's going to happen," Eleanor continued, pulling out more documents. "You're going to sign these papers, which transfer your claim to the lottery winnings to my daughter. In exchange, we'll make these tax problems disappear and give you $5 million to start fresh somewhere far away from here." She leaned forward, her perfume choking me, her eyes cold as winter. "Take the money, Darian. Take it and disappear before we make your life a living hell. And if I don't," Eleanor's mask finally dropped completely, "then we'll destroy you. We have friends in the IRS, friends in law enforcement, friends who can make sure you spend the next decade fighting charges that will bankrupt you and ruin your life. That lottery money will sit in court while you rot in federal prison for tax evasion." She stood up and walked around the coffee table until she was standing directly over me, her voice dropping to a whisper that the hidden microphones captured perfectly. "We'll make sure your life is ruined," she hissed. "Your credit, your reputation, your freedom, we'll take it all away from you. By the time we're done, you'll be begging us to take the lottery money just to make the pain stop." That's when the front door burst open and Agent Martinez walked in wearing an FBI jacket and the kind of smile that suggested Christmas had come early. "Eleanor Monroe," she said, holding up her badge, "you're under arrest for extortion, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to commit fraud." The sound of handcuffs clicking was like music to my ears. Eleanor's face went from predatory confidence to absolute terror in less than 2 seconds, while Clarissa just sat there making sounds like a broken air conditioner. "You set us up," Eleanor whispered as Agent Martinez read her rights. "Actually," I said, watching as more FBI agents filed through the door, "you set yourselves up. I just gave you the stage to perform on." As they led Eleanor and Clarissa away in handcuffs, Rosa poked her head through the door and grinned at me like a proud parent watching their kid graduate from college. "Not bad for a guy who used to fix cars for a living," she said. You just helped us record enough evidence to put these people away for the next decade. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The federal courthouse looked like the kind of building where justice wasn't just served. It was delivered with a side of marble columns and enough gravitas to make even hardened criminals reconsider their life choices. I sat in the gallery behind the prosecution table, watching Charles Whitmore and Agent Martinez prepare to destroy what remained of the Monroe family's dignity with the efficiency of a surgical strike team. 3 months had passed since the arrests. 3 months of watching Clarissa and Eleanor's legal team try to build a defense out of smoke, mirrors, and increasingly desperate motions to dismiss. Their lawyer, some overpaid suit named Hamilton Prescott III, looked like he'd rather be defending anyone else for anything else, including war crimes and puppy theft. Clarissa sat at the defendant's table wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed spectacularly with her complexion, while Eleanor wore the kind of designer outfit that cost more than most people's cars, but couldn't hide the fact that she'd aged about 10 years in 3 months. Both of them kept glancing back at me like they were hoping I'd spontaneously combust and solve all their problems. The judge, the Honorable Patricia Chun, had the kind of reputation that made defense attorneys wake up in cold sweats. She'd been putting white-collar criminals behind bars for 20 years and had apparently never met a fraud case she couldn't see through like plastic wrap. The prosecution will present its opening statement, Judge Chin announced, and Charles stood up with the confidence of a man who was about to shoot fish in a barrel with a nuclear weapon. Your Honor, Charles began, this case is about greed, arrogance, and the mistaken belief that money makes you above the law. The defendants didn't just commit lottery fraud, they documented it, celebrated it, and when caught, tried to threaten their way out of it. He gestured toward a screen where Rosa had compiled a greatest hits collection of Clarissa's Instagram posts. There she was, posing with the lottery ticket and declaring herself single and winning. There she was again, celebrating with her real family after kicking out her toxic husband. And there she was signing papers for her single girl mansion with money she'd obtained through fraud. The defendants created a digital evidence trail. Charles continued. That reads like a how-to guide for committing federal crimes. Then came the recordings from the night Eleanor had tried to bribe and threaten me. The jury listened in fascination as Eleanor's voice filled the courtroom, clear as a bell, threatening to destroy my life unless I signed away my legal rights to the lottery winnings. We'll make sure your life is ruined, Eleanor's recorded voice promised. Your credit, your reputation, your freedom, we'll take it all away from you. One juror actually shook her head in disgust. Another looked like he was taking notes for his memoir titled, Rich People Are Terrible. Hamilton Prescott III stood up for the defense looking like a man who'd been asked to perform brain surgery with a butter knife. His opening statement was a masterpiece of desperation disguised as legal strategy. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, my clients made mistakes. Paperwork errors. Misunderstandings about complex legal requirements. But mistakes are not crimes, and misunderstandings are not conspiracy. It was like watching someone try to explain away a bank robbery by calling it an unauthorized withdrawal with aggressive customer service issues. The prosecution's case took 2 days to present and felt like watching a perfectly choreographed demolition. Rosa testified about the financial evidence. Agent Martinez explained the surveillance operation, and Charles walked the jury through federal lottery law with the patience of a kindergarten teacher explaining why we don't eat crayons. The defense case took about 4 hours and consisted mainly of character witnesses who testified that Eleanor had always been a pillar of the community and Clarissa had never intentionally hurt anyone. It was like trying to stop a freight train with a strongly worded letter. During cross-examination, Charles destroyed their expert witness, some consultant who tried to argue that the lottery forms were ambiguously worded, so thoroughly that the man looked like he wanted to change his name and move to another country. But the moment that really sealed their fate came when Clarissa took the stand in her own defense. Against her lawyer's obvious wishes, she tried to explain how she'd misunderstood the requirements for filing lottery claims. I thought that since I bought the ticket with my own money, she said, it was my lottery ticket. Charles stood up for cross-examination with the expression of a shark who'd just spotted a wounded seal. Mrs. Monroe Hayes, he said, emphasizing the hyphenated name. You were married to Mr. Hayes on the night of the lottery drawing, correct? Yes, but... And you used money from your joint bank account to purchase the ticket? Well, technically, but... And when you filed your claim, you checked the box marked single, correct? I was confused about. Mrs. Monroe Hayes, did you or did you not check the box marked single while legally married to my client? Clarissa looked at her lawyer, who was making the kind of face people make when they're watching a car accident in slow motion. Yes, she whispered. I'm sorry, could you speak up for the jury? Yes. Clarissa snapped. Yes, I checked the single box. But I didn't know it was illegal. Charles smiled. Thank you. No further questions. The jury deliberated for exactly 47 minutes, which I'm pretty sure was just long enough to elect a foreman and figure out how to fill out the paperwork. When they returned, the foreman stood up and delivered the verdicts with the solemnity of someone announcing the weather. On the charge of lottery fraud, we find the defendant Clarissa Monroe guilty. On the charge of perjury, we find the defendant Clarissa Monroe guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, we find the defendant Clarissa Monroe guilty. Eleanor's charges took a little longer to read, mainly because Rosa had been thorough enough to charge her with everything from extortion to witness intimidation to conspiracy to obstruct justice. By the time the foreman finished reading, Eleanor looked like she'd been hit by a truck carrying a load of karma. Judge Chin scheduled sentencing for the following month, but she gave us a preview of coming attractions right there in the courtroom. Mrs. Monroe Hayes, she said, looking at Clarissa with the expression of someone who'd just found something unpleasant on the bottom of her shoe. You will be sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation. Clarissa started crying, but not the pretty movie star kind of crying. The ugly, snotty kind that happens when reality finally catches up with you. Mrs. Monroe, Judge Chun continued, turning to Eleanor. You will be sentenced to 2 years in federal prison for extortion and witness intimidation, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. Eleanor didn't cry. She just sat there staring straight ahead, like someone had just told her the sun was never going to rise again. As the bailiffs led them away in handcuffs, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness, exactly. I was still too angry for that. But satisfaction. Pure, crystalline satisfaction that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe actually made sense. Charles shook my hand in the hallway afterward. Congratulations, he said. You just helped put away 2 people who thought money made them untouchable. Rosa punched my shoulder hard enough to rearrange my internal organs. Not bad for a guy who fixes cars, she said. You just proved that sometimes the little guy wins. As I walked out of that courthouse, I couldn't help but smile. Clarissa had called me useless, but I just helped send her and her mother to federal prison. Turns out I was pretty useful after all. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of what used to be Clarissa's stolen mansion, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and redemption. The house was officially mine now. Court-ordered restitution for emotional distress and legal fees. Turns out federal judges don't appreciate lottery fraud, especially when it's documented on Instagram like a how-to guide for idiots. The mansion had been transformed from Eleanor's gaudy monument to excess into something that actually felt like home. Gone were the crystal chandeliers that looked like they'd been stolen from Liberace's garage sale. Gone were the marble statues of cherubs that seemed to judge you for existing. In their place was furniture you could actually sit on without feeling like you were defiling a museum exhibit. But the real transformation wasn't in the house. It was in what I'd done with the money. The Monroe Foundation for Fair Play occupied 3 floors of a downtown building that had once housed a payday loan operation. The irony wasn't lost on me. Charles Whitmore served as our legal counsel, Rosa Delgado ran our investigations department, and I got to play the role I'd always been best at, the guy who fixed things that were broken. We'd helped Grace Bennett, a widow whose in-laws had tried to steal her husband's life insurance money through forged documents. We'd taken on the Ortiz family, whose siblings had used fake signatures to steal their childhood home. Every case reminded me of that night Clarissa had looked me in the eye and called me useless. The mail still brought weekly letters from Clarissa, pathetic, rambling apologies that started with, "I've had time to think," and ended with, "I know we can work this out." I'd stopped reading them after the 15th one. Some mistakes don't get do-overs, and federal fraud is definitely one of them. Eleanor's letters were shorter and infinitely more entertaining. Demands for forgiveness from someone who'd once offered me $5 million to disappear. The woman who'd threatened to destroy my life was now begging for my mercy from a federal prison cell. I kept them in a folder labeled "Karma is a Beautiful Thing." Every evening, I did exactly what I was doing now. Stood on this balcony with a glass of good whiskey, watching the lights come on across the city. Sometimes I thought about the night Clarissa had told me to vanish from the face of the earth. How she'd called me useless. How she'd thrown $500 at me like I was a bellhop she wanted to forget. The lottery had given me $73 million, but more importantly, it had given me something I'd never had before, the absolute certainty of my own worth. Not the kind of worth that comes from a bank account, but the kind that comes from knowing you can take a hit that should have destroyed you and come back swinging. Clarissa had been wrong about everything, but she'd been especially wrong about one thing. I wasn't useless. I was the guy who'd turned her moment of greed into a foundation that helped people fight back against exactly the kind of entitled bullshit she and her family had tried to pull. The city lights twinkled below like stars that had decided to come down to earth and party. Somewhere out there, Clarissa was probably counting days until her release, planning her next scheme, dreaming of the life she'd thrown away for money that was never really hers. And somewhere else, Grace Bennett was sleeping in a house that was legally hers again, thanks to lawyers who didn't charge by the hour. That's the thing about true worth. It's not something you win in a lottery. It's something you prove when everything goes to hell and you refuse to stay down. Clarissa had called me useless, but I'd built something that would outlast both of us. And that, it turned out, was worth more than all the lottery money in the world. On Christmas morning, I opened a gift from my wife's family. It was my missing wristwatch from last year, the only thing left of my father. I thought I lost it. Her sister laughed and said, "Oh, I forgot I took that." When I confronted her, my Mill said, "Don't start drama over a watch." That night, I quietly packed a bag. The next day, my wife woke me up screaming, "What did you say to her?" You know what they say about the best laid plans? Yeah, well, mine just got absolutely obliterated by the cosmic joke that is my family. Here I am, standing in what was supposed to be the crown jewel of my 32 years on this godforsaken planet, my brand new apartment that I busted my ass to afford, and I'm having what you might generously call a moment. Let me paint you a picture of how this train wreck unfolded. I spent the entire morning scrubbing every single corner of this place until it practically sparkled like something out of those home improvement shows my mom's always glued to. We're talking hands and knees, toothbrush in the grout, kind of cleaning here, people. I even bought one of those fancy all-purpose cleaners that costs more than my weekly grocery budget because, hey, tonight was supposed to be special. The candles? Strategically placed throughout the living room like I'm some kind of interior design genius. Vanilla and sandalwood, classy stuff, not those cheap dollar store numbers that smell like a chemical factory explosion. Fresh flowers from the farmer's market downtown, the kind that make you feel like you've got your life together even when you're secretly eating cereal for dinner 3 nights a week. I arranged them in this vase I'd been saving for months, the one I found at that antique shop, and thought, someday, when I have people over, this'll look perfect. And the food? Jesus Christ, the food. I went full Gordon Ramsay on this spread. We're talking homemade lasagna that took 4 hours to prep, garlic bread that I actually made from scratch instead of buying those frozen hockey pucks from the grocery store, Caesar salad with real Parmesan that I grated myself like some kind of culinary saint. I made enough to feed a small army because that's what you do when your family's coming over, right? You make sure there's plenty because God forbid someone goes home hungry and then spends the next week telling everyone how stingy you are. This whole shindig was supposed to be my victory lap, my look what I accomplished without any help from anyone moment. After years of living in that shoebox apartment where the neighbors sounded like they were training for the WWE championships every night at 2 a.m., I finally had my own place. A real place. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, a balcony that actually fits more than a single folding chair. Hell, I've even got a dishwasher that doesn't sound like it's summoning the devil every time I run it. So there I was, dressed in my good shirt. You know, the one I save for job interviews and funerals, checking my phone every 5 minutes like some lovesick teenager waiting for a text back. 6 o'clock came and went. Then 7. By 8, I'm starting to think maybe I got the time wrong. even though I sent the invitation 3 weeks ago and followed up with a group text last Sunday. You remember Sunday, right? The day my dear brother Martin was supposed to be totally free and wouldn't miss it for the world. The candles are burning lower, casting these weird shadows that make the apartment feel more like a funeral home than a celebration. The lasagna is getting that crusty edge that happens when it sits in the oven too long on warm, and I'm standing there like an idiot, checking the time on my phone for the 100th time. That's when the doubt starts creeping in. You know the feeling, that cold, slimy sensation in your gut that whispers maybe you're not as important as you thought you were. Maybe that group chat where everyone was so enthusiastic was just politeness. Maybe "we'll definitely be there" is code for "we'll show up if we don't find something better to do." But I'm not ready to give up yet. I mean, Claire's always late to everything. It's practically her trademark. She once showed up to her own birthday party 45 minutes after it started because she lost track of time getting her nails done. And my parents? They're probably stuck in traffic or helping my sister with something. There's always something with my sister. 9 o'clock rolls around, and that's when I make the mistake of opening social media. You know what they say about curiosity killing the cat? Well, consider me officially deceased. There it is, in living color on my phone screen. Photos from Martin's impromptu fishing trip. And not just Martin. Oh no, that would be too simple. There's Claire, grinning like she just won the lottery, holding up some pathetic-looking base like it's the catch of the century. My parents are in the background, Dad with his arm around Mom, both of them looking happier than I've seen them in months. My sister Jessica's there too, making duck faces at the camera because apparently she never mentally graduated from 2009. The timestamp on the first photo? 4:30 this afternoon. Which means they all bailed on my housewarming to go fishing. Fishing. Not a wedding. Not an emergency. Not even a decent excuse like food poisoning or a flat tire. They chose standing around in waders, getting eaten alive by mosquitoes, over celebrating the biggest achievement of my adult life. I scroll through the comments, each one a tiny knife twist in my chest. Looks like such a blast. Family time is the best time. Jealous of this crew. Not a single person asked where I was. Not one comment that said, "Hey, isn't James supposed to be celebrating his new place tonight?" The silence in my apartment becomes deafening. The refrigerator hum that I barely noticed during the day now sounds like a freight train. The upstairs neighbor's TV, which I can usually tune out, might as well be broadcasting directly into my living room. Even the candles seem to mock me with their cheerful flickering, like they're saying, "Look how festive we are for your pity party, population 1." I walk over to the kitchen island where all this beautiful food is laid out like an offering to gods who decided not to show up. The lasagna's developing that sad, dried-out look that screams, "Leftover Tuesday." The salad's wilting despite my best efforts with the fancy dressing I splurged on. The garlic bread's gone cold and hard, probably suitable now only for feeding pigeons or using as hockey pucks. And then, just when I think this night can't get any more humiliating, my phone buzzes with such violence I nearly drop it. The screen lights up with a message that makes my blood run cold. "Claire, we need to talk now." Not, "Sorry we missed your party." Not, "Something came up." Not even a bullshit excuse about traffic or feeling sick. Just, "We need to talk now." Like I'm some employee who's been caught stealing from the petty cash box. I stare at those 5 words until they blur together. The audacity is breathtaking, really. They ghost my housewarming party to go fishing with my golden boy brother, post it all over social media like they're proud of ditching me, and then have the nerve to demand my immediate attention when it's convenient for them. Standing there in the glow of my own pathetic celebration, surrounded by enough food to feed the family that couldn't be bothered to show up, I feel something shift inside me. It's not sadness anymore. That passed about an hour ago. It's not even anger, though there's plenty of that simmering under the surface. It's something colder, sharper, something that tastes like clarity and feels like the first breath of air after being underwater too long. Because for the first time in my 32 years of being the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who always shows up, I'm starting to understand something important. Maybe it's time to stop showing up for people who can't be bothered to show up for me. So here I am, staring at my phone like it just grew tentacles and started speaking Mandarin. We need to talk now. 5 little words that somehow managed to carry the weight of 32 years of being everyone's reliable backup plan. The sheer balls on these people, I swear to God. You want to know what's really rich about this whole situation? Not a single one of them could spare 30 seconds to text me, "Hey, something came up, can't make it tonight," before they all piled into Martin's truck for their spontaneous fishing adventure. But now it's suddenly urgent. Now I'm supposed to drop everything and dance to their tune like some kind of trained monkey. My phone starts ringing immediately because apparently "we need to talk now" means "answer your damn phone this instant, James." Claire's contact photo pops up. That selfie she took last Christmas where she's wearing that ridiculous Santa hat and grinning like she just discovered the secret to world peace. Looking at it now, all I can think is how fake that smile looks. How many times has she smiled at me like that while planning to screw me over? I let it ring, and ring, and ring some more. There's something almost therapeutic about watching her name flash on my screen while I do absolutely nothing about it. For once in my life, I'm not jumping through hoops the second someone demands my attention. Revolutionary concept, right? The voicemail notification pops up, followed immediately by another call. This time it's Dad, and his contact photo is just as irritating. Him in his favorite fishing vest, the one he wears like it's some kind of uniform that proves he's more outdoorsy than the rest of us mere mortals. I decline that one too, and it feels almost as good as the first time. Then the texts start flooding in like a digital tsunami of guilt and manipulation. "Claire, James, answer your phone." "Dad, son, this is important." "Mom, please call us back. We need to explain." Even Jessica gets in on the action. "Just pick up. It's about Martin." Of course it's about Martin. Everything's always about Martin. Martin the charmer, Martin the free spirit, Martin the golden child who can do no wrong even when he's doing everything wrong. I should have seen this coming from a mile away. They didn't ditch my housewarming just for fun. They ditched it because precious Martin needed their attention for something, and naturally, his needs trumped my celebration. I walk over to my kitchen island and pour myself a glass of wine from the bottle I'd opened to celebrate with my family. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm now drinking it alone while they blow up my phone from whatever bar they probably hit after their fishing expedition. The wine tastes expensive because it was expensive, because I wanted tonight to be special, and now every sip feels like I'm drinking liquid vindication. My chest feels heavy, like someone's sitting on it. It's this weird combination of hurt and anger that I can't quite shake. Part of me, the part that's been trained through decades of family dynamics to be the good son, the reliable one, the peacekeeper, wants to just answer the damn phone and find out what crisis Martin has stumbled into this time. Because let's be real, it's definitely a crisis. Martin doesn't inspire family emergency meetings because he won the lottery or got promoted at work. But there's this other part of me, this quiet voice that's been getting louder over the past few hours. That's saying something different. It's saying, wait, make them explain. For once in your life, don't just roll over and accept their version of events. Don't let them steamroll you into feeling guilty for being hurt that they abandoned you. The notifications keep stacking up like digital daggers. Missed call after missed call, voicemail after voicemail, text after increasingly frantic text. My phone's practically having a seizure from all the incoming messages. It's almost funny how quickly their tone shifts from demanding to pleading. "James, please. We're worried about you. Just let us explain what happened." "What happened?" "I'll tell you what happened. You all made a choice. You looked at your calendars, saw that you had two options: support your son/husband/brother at his housewarming party, or go fishing with Martin, and you chose Martin. You didn't even have the courtesy to lie about it. You posted photos like you were proud of your decision. I'm pacing around my apartment now, stepping over the discarded party supplies that earlier today seemed so hopeful and now just look pathetic. The balloons I hung are starting to lose their helium, drooping sadly like deflated dreams. The "Welcome to my new home" banner I spent 20 minutes positioning perfectly now feels like a cruel joke. That's when I hear the knock at my door. Not the confident rap of someone who belongs here, but this tentative little tap that screams awkward neighbor interaction. I look through the peephole and see Mrs. Garcia from across the hall, holding what looks like a plate covered with aluminum foil. She's in her 70s, this sweet lady who always says hello in the elevator and asks about my job like she actually cares about the answer. I debate pretending I'm not home, but something about her kind face makes me open the door. She's standing there in her flowered housecoat and slippers, looking genuinely concerned. "James, Mijo, I was just wondering, Did your party get canceled? She's looking past me into the apartment, and I can see her taking in the untouched spread of food, the lonely candles still burning, the decorations that scream celebration for one. I try to force a smile, but it feels like I'm wearing someone else's face. Oh no, Mrs. Garcia. Just running a little late, you know how it is. But she's not buying it. She's lived long enough to recognize bullshit when she sees it, and her face softens with this expression that's somehow worse than anger or disappointment. It's pity. Pure, unadulterated pity. She's looking at me like I'm a lost puppy that got left in the rain. Oh, sweetheart, she says, and those two words carry more genuine concern than I've heard from my own family all night. She holds out the plate. I made extra empanadas. Thought maybe your guests might enjoy them. I take the plate because what else can I do? Thank you. That's really thoughtful. My voice sounds strange even to me, like it belongs to someone else. She pats my arm gently. You know, Mijo, sometimes the people who should show up for us don't. But that doesn't mean you're not worth showing up for. And just like that, this woman I barely know has summed up everything I've been feeling in one simple sentence. After she goes back to her apartment, I stand there holding her empanadas, and something inside me crystallizes into absolute clarity. They had their chance. They chose fishing over family, my family, specifically. They chose Martin's drama over my achievement. They chose to humiliate me publicly and then expect me to be available the second they needed something from me. Well, guess what? For the first time in my adult life, I'm not available. I'm not jumping when they say jump. I'm not answering their calls or responding to their increasingly desperate texts. I'm going to let them sit with the consequences of their choices for once. My phone buzzes again. Claire, naturally. James, please. We know you're upset, but this is bigger than tonight. I read the message twice, then set my phone face down on the counter. Because you know what? Tonight was big to me, and they missed it. They don't get to decide that their emergency trumps my pain just because it's convenient for them. The quiet voice in my head isn't so quiet anymore. It's practically shouting, make them wait. Make them explain. Make them understand what it feels like to be ignored when you need someone most. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Morning comes whether you want it to or not. And let me tell you, I spent most of the night staring at my ceiling like it held the secrets to the universe. My phone sat on the nightstand like some kind of digital time bomb, buzzing intermittently with voicemails and texts that I refused to acknowledge. By the time dawn crept through my blinds, I'd counted exactly 17 missed calls and 23 unread messages. A new personal record in family harassment, if we're keeping score. I shuffle to the kitchen in my boxers and old college t-shirt, stepping over the remnants of last night's disaster. The candles have burned down to little waxy puddles. The flowers are starting to droop despite my efforts to keep them fresh, and the smell of cold lasagna hangs in the air like a memorial to my misplaced optimism. It's like a crime scene. Except the only thing that died here was my faith in my family's basic human decency. Coffee first, existential crisis second. That's my motto. I'm standing there watching the coffee maker do its thing, trying to pretend that my hands aren't shaking slightly from a combination of caffeine withdrawal and suppressed rage, when my phone starts ringing again. Claire's face pops up on the screen, that same Christmas photo that looked fake yesterday and looks even faker today. Something in me snaps. Maybe it's the way the morning light is hitting all the untouched food, or maybe it's the fact that I've had 8 hours to really marinate in my anger, but I decide enough is enough. I swipe to answer, and before she can even get a word out, I'm already on the offensive. Oh, so now you want to talk? My voice comes out rougher than I expected, probably because I spent half the night grinding my teeth. After posting your fishing trip all over Facebook like some kind of victory lap? There's a pause. And when Claire finally speaks, her tone is shaky in that way she gets when she knows she's screwed up, but is trying to maintain some semblance of control. James, listen, we need to explain what happened. It's about Martin. He's in serious trouble with money. And there it is. The magic words that are supposed to make everything okay, that are supposed to justify why my entire family ghosted me on one of the most important nights of my life. Martin's in trouble. Martin needs help. Martin. Oh. Let me guess, I say, pouring my coffee with more force than necessary, some of it splashing onto the counter. Golden Boy made some questionable financial decisions, And now everybody needs to rally around him like he's some kind of war hero instead of a 35-year-old man who can't balance a checkbook. James, don't be like this. You know it's more complicated than. More complicated than what? More complicated than showing up to your husband's housewarming party? More complicated than sending a text saying you can't make it? More complicated than basic human courtesy. I can hear her breathing on the other end. That frustrated sigh she does when she thinks I'm being unreasonable. It's the same sigh she gave me when I complained about spending Christmas at Martin's house 3 years running, or when I suggested we might celebrate my birthday for once instead of making it all about whoever else needed attention that week. Look, she says, and I can practically see her running her fingers through her hair. Martin owes some serious money to some serious people. We're talking about his safety here. We told him you'd help because you're good with money. You're responsible. You have your life together. Oh, so now I'm responsible? I'm pacing around my kitchen island, and I catch a glimpse of myself in the reflection of my microwave. I look unhinged, which is probably accurate. Now I'm the one with my life together? Funny how those qualities only matter when you need something from me. That's when I hear Dad's voice in the background, and Jesus Christ, he's actually there. They're tag-teaming me. This isn't just Claire calling to apologize or explain. This is a coordinated assault. I can picture them huddled around her phone like they're planning a military operation, probably in Martin's living room, probably surrounded by whatever expensive toys he bought instead of paying his bills. Dad's voice gets louder, like he's moving closer to the phone. James, stop being dramatic. You know we care about you, but this is serious. Martin could lose his house, his business, everything. You're the stable one, son. You need to step in here. The stable one, the responsible one, the reliable one. All these labels they've pinned on me over the years, labels that apparently only matter when they need my wallet or my problem-solving skills. Where were these compliments when I graduated college? When I got my first promotion? When I saved up enough money to buy my own place? Nowhere. That's where. But the second their precious Martin screws up, suddenly I'm the family hero they need to save the day. Step in. I'm laughing now, but it's not a happy sound. It's the kind of laugh you hear in movies right before someone has a complete breakdown. Step in like how you all stepped in for me last night. Oh wait, that's right. You stepped right past me and into Martin's fishing boat. That's not fair, Claire says, and her voice is getting that edge to it. That means she's shifting from apologetic to defensive. We explained that Martin needed us yesterday. He was having a panic attack about his situation. We couldn't just leave him alone. But you could leave me alone. The words come out flat, matter of fact. You could leave me standing in my apartment with enough food to feed 10 people, waiting for my family to show up and celebrate the biggest accomplishment of my adult life. That was totally fine. James, come on. It's just a party. We can celebrate your apartment anytime. Martin's problems can't wait. Just a party. Just a party. I set my coffee mug down so hard it's a miracle it doesn't shatter. Just a party? Claire, do you have any idea how long I saved for that apartment? How many weekends I worked overtime? How many dinners out I skipped? How many times I bought generic everything just so I could afford the down payment? Of course I know, but... Do you know what I spent on food for last night? What I spent on decorations, on cleaning supplies, on making everything perfect because I wanted to share this moment with the people who are supposed to matter most to me. Silence. Do you know how it felt to stand there for 4 hours, checking my phone, making excuses in my head for why you weren't there yet, only to find out that you were all having a grand old time taking pictures without me? More silence, but I can hear Dad saying something in the background that sounds like, just tell him we'll make it up to him. Make it up to me. Like this is something that can be fixed with a rain check or a dinner out. Like my feelings are some kind of inconvenient speed bump on the way to solving Martin's problems. Here's what's going to happen, I say, surprised by how calm my voice sounds. You're going to hang up this phone, and you're going to think really hard about whether Martin's financial crisis is more important than your marriage. And Dad, if you're listening, you're going to think about whether your golden child's latest screw-up is worth losing your other son. James, don't be ridiculous. Nobody's losing anybody. We're family. Family shows up, Claire. Family keeps promises. Family doesn't choose fishing over celebrating each other's achievements and then call the next morning demanding favors. I can hear Dad's voice getting louder, more insistent. Stop being selfish, James. This is bigger than your hurt feelings. Martin could lose everything. And that's when something inside me doesn't just snap, it completely obliterates. Selfish? Selfish? I've spent 32 years being the opposite of selfish. I've been the dependable one, the stable one, the one who cleans up everyone else's messes while never asking for anything in return. And the one time I ask you all to show up for something that matters to me, I'm being selfish. The words are pouring out of me now like a dam burst, and I can't stop them even if I wanted to. You want to know what's selfish? Ditching your husband's housewarming party to go fishing. What's selfish is posting photos of your fun family day while I'm sitting alone wondering what I did wrong. What's selfish is calling me up the next morning, not to apologize, but to demand that I bail out the brother who couldn't even be bothered to wish me congratulations on my new home. James, I'm not done. My voice is steel now, cold and sharp. What's selfish is 32 years of making Martin the center of the universe while treating me like I'm just some supporting character in his story. What's selfish is expecting me to drop everything and save him from consequences he created for himself while never once acknowledging that I might need support too. Dead silence on the other end. So no, Claire. No, Dad. I'm not stepping in. I'm not being the reliable one this time. You made your choice yesterday, and now you get to live with it. And for the first time in my adult life, I hang up on my family. You'd think that hanging up on your family for the first time in your life would feel more satisfying, but honestly, it just left me feeling hollow, like I'd been carrying around this massive weight for so long that now that it's gone, I don't know how to stand up straight anymore. I spent the rest of the morning rage cleaning my apartment, scrubbing dishes that were already clean, reorganizing closets that were already organized, basically doing anything to keep my hands busy so my brain wouldn't have time to second-guess what I'd just done. By afternoon, I'd almost convinced myself that maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I should call Claire back and apologize for losing my temper. You know how it is when you're programmed from birth to be the peacekeeper. Even when you're completely in the right, there's this nagging voice that says you're being the problem. That voice got real quiet real fast when I heard the knock on my door around 6 p.m. Not Mrs. Garcia's tentative little tap this time. This was confident, familiar, the kind of knock that says, I belong here, and I'm coming in whether you like it or not. I look through the peephole, and there she is, Claire, standing in the hallway with that smile plastered on her face. Not her genuine smile, mind you, but that practiced, saccharine thing she pulls out when she needs something. The smile that says, I'm about to manipulate you, and we both know it. But let's pretend this is all very pleasant. She's dressed to kill, too. Not in her usual jeans and t-shirt combo, but in that blue dress I complimented her on last month, the one that brings out her eyes. Her hair's done up in that style she knows I like, and she's even wearing the perfume I bought her for our anniversary. The whole 9 yards. This isn't Claire the wife coming to have an honest conversation. This is Claire the actress coming to give a performance. I debate not answering, just like I did with the phone calls, but something morbid in me wants to see how this plays out. So I open the door and lean against the frame, not stepping aside to let her in. If she wants to do this, we're doing it in the doorway where the whole hallway can hear. Hey, baby, she says, and that fake sweetness in her voice makes my teeth hurt. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. You know, check out the new place properly. In the neighborhood. Right. We lived 20 minutes apart, and there's absolutely nothing in my neighborhood she'd have any reason to visit. But sure, let's pretend this is some casual, spontaneous visit. Little late for the housewarming tour, don't you think? I say, not moving from my position in the doorway. That was supposed to happen yesterday. Remember yesterday? Her smile falters for just a second, but she recovers like the pro she is. James, don't be like that. I know you're upset about last night, but let me explain. It wasn't personal. Martin was having a complete breakdown. He called Dad crying, actually crying, about losing his house. We couldn't just ignore that. But you could ignore me. It's not the same thing, and you know it. She takes a step closer, and I catch a whiff of that perfume. It used to make me weak in the knees. Now it just smells like desperation. Your party was a celebration. Martin's situation was a crisis. You understand the difference, right? The condescension in that last question makes my jaw clench. Oh, I understand perfectly. My achievements don't qualify as crises, so they go to the bottom of the priority list. Got it. That's not what I meant. She's still smiling, but it's getting more strained by the second. Look, Can we not do this in the hallway? Let me come in. We'll open a bottle of wine, and we can talk about this like adults. Like adults. As if I'm the one being childish here. As if standing up for myself and refusing to be walked all over is somehow immature. Adults keep their commitments, Claire. Adults don't ghost their family members and then show up the next day pretending nothing happened. That's when I hear footsteps in the stairwell, heavy and deliberate. Dad appears around the corner, and I swear to God, it's like watching a bad sitcom unfold. He's got that expression on his face that I know all too well. The one that says, I'm disappointed in you and you're about to hear all about it. James, he says, his voice carrying that boom that used to make me snap to attention when I was 12. We need to talk. We already talked this morning, Dad. I thought I made myself pretty clear. He walks up behind Claire, and now I've got both of them standing in my hallway like some kind of intervention squad. Dad's wearing his serious face, the one he used to pull out when he'd catch me and Martin fighting his kids. Except back then Martin was never the one getting lectured. What you made clear, Dad says, is that you're being selfish and stubborn. Martin needs help, and instead of stepping up like families should, you're throwing a tantrum because we missed your party. Throwing a tantrum. A fucking tantrum. Like I'm some 5-year-old having a meltdown in the cereal aisle instead of a grown man who's finally had enough of being treated like an afterthought. You know what, Dad? You're right. I am throwing a tantrum. Want to know why? I push off from the doorframe and stand up straighter. Because in 32 years, this is the first time anyone in this family has had to deal with me being anything other than perfectly accommodating. And you can't handle it. Claire jumps in before Dad can respond, probably sensing that this is going sideways fast. James, honey, please. Don't take it personally. Martin's situation really is serious. We told him you'd help because you're so good with money. You're dependable. You always come through. You're the responsible one. The responsible one. There it is again, that label they love to slap on me when they need something. Not when I'm graduating college. Not when I'm getting promoted. Not when I'm buying my first home. Just when Martin screws up and they need someone to fix it. Dependable. I repeat, tasting the word like it's something bitter. You know what else is dependable? The sun rising every morning. Gravity keeping you anchored to the ground. Death and taxes. But you don't celebrate those things, do you? You just expect them to be there. Dad's face is getting red now. That vein in his forehead starting to throb the way it did when I was a teenager and he was about to ground me. Stop being dramatic, James. This isn't about you. That's the problem, Dad. It's never about me. When was the last time anything in this family was about me? When was the last time you called to see how I was doing? Not because you needed something, but because you actually cared? The silence that follows is deafening. Dad's mouth opens and closes like he's trying to find words, and Claire's looking back and forth between us like she's watching a tennis match. When was the last time you acknowledged any of my accomplishments without immediately shifting the conversation to Martin? When was the last time you showed up for something that mattered to me? Still nothing. I bought this apartment, Dad. With my own money, after years of saving and sacrifice. Do you know what that means to me? Do you have any idea how proud I am of this place? Of course we're proud of you, son. But nothing. You're proud of me in theory, but when it comes to actually showing up and celebrating with me, suddenly there are more important things to do. There's always something more important when it comes to me. Claire tries to step forward, but I raise my hand to stop her. You left me alone on the night I needed you most, and now you want me to save the brother who couldn't even be bothered to congratulate me. You want me to bail out the golden child who spent his whole life having everyone else clean up his messes. James, you're being unfair. No, Claire. Unfair is what you did to me. Unfair is 32 years of making me feel like I don't matter unless someone needs something from me. Unfair is standing here in my hallway, wearing the dress you know I like and the perfume I bought you, trying to manipulate me into forgetting how badly you hurt me. Dad's voice drops to that dangerous quiet tone he used to use when he was really angry. That's enough. You're talking to your wife, not some stranger on the street. Show some respect. Respect. I almost laugh. Where was the respect when you all decided Martin's fishing trip was more important than my housewarming? Where was the respect when you posted photos of yourselves having fun while I was sitting here alone? We made a mistake, okay? Claire's voice is getting higher, more desperate. We made a mistake, and we're sorry. But we can't change what happened, and right now Martin needs our help. Your help. You're his brother. And you're my wife. But that didn't stop you from choosing him over me yesterday. I can see tears starting to form in her eyes, but I'm done being moved by her tears. I've spent too many years caving every time she cried. Too many years letting her emotional manipulation override my own needs. Here's what's going to happen, I say, my voice steady and calm. You're going to leave. Both of you. You're going to go back to Martin and tell him that the dependable, responsible brother he couldn't be bothered to show up for isn't available to solve his problems. Dad steps forward, his chest puffing out like he's about to physically intimidate me into submission. You don't get to turn your back on family, James. That's not how this works. Family. I look him straight in the eye. Dad, when exactly did I become family to you? Because from where I'm standing, I've been more like an employee. Someone you call when you need a job done, but not someone you actually care about. That's not true, and you know it. Do I? Then prove it. Tell me one thing, just one thing, that you've done for me in the past year that wasn't because you needed something from me. The silence stretches between us like a chasm, and I can see the exact moment when Dad realizes he can't answer that question. His face goes from angry to confused to something that might be shame, but I'm not sticking around to find out. That's what I thought. I say quietly. You don't get to rewrite this story anymore. You made your choice yesterday when you chose Martin's fishing trip over my celebration. Now you get to live with the consequences. And for the second time in 2 days, I close a door on my family. Except this time, it's literal, and it feels a hell of a lot more final. You know that scene in zombie movies where the hero thinks they've finally found safety, but then the undead start pouring out of every crack and crevice? Yeah, that's basically what my life became over the next few days. Except instead of flesh-eating monsters, it was my extended family launching a coordinated guilt campaign that would make a military strategist weep with envy. It started the morning after I slammed the door on Claire and Dad. My phone buzzed at 7 a.m., which, by the way, should be illegal unless someone's literally dying, and it was Aunt Susan. Sweet Aunt Susan, who sends me birthday cards with $20 bills inside and always asks about my job at family gatherings like she actually cares about my boring corporate life. James, honey, she said in that syrupy voice that immediately put me on high alert. I heard about the situation with Martin. Your poor parents are beside themselves with worry. Poor parents. Right. The same parents who couldn't spare an evening to celebrate my biggest life achievement, but somehow found the time to canvass the entire family tree looking for reinforcements in their guilt war. Morning, Aunt Susan, I said, because I was raised with manners even if the rest of my family apparently wasn't. What situation would that be? Oh, don't play coy, sweetie. We all know Martin's in a bind, and family needs to stick together during times like these. Your mother called me crying last night. Crying, James. She's so worried about both her boys. Both her boys. That's rich, considering one of her boys has been completely ignored for the past 32 years, while the other one has been treated like some kind of golden god who can do no wrong. But sure, now she's worried about both of us. I'm sure she is, I said, not bothering to hide the sarcasm in my voice. It must be really hard for her to see Martin facing consequences for his actions for once. James, that's a terrible thing to say about your brother. He's struggling, and instead of helping him, you're being, well, cold. That's not the James the first no. Cold. There's that word again, the one Claire threw at me yesterday. Funny how quickly I went from dependable and responsible to cold the second I stopped being their personal ATM and emotional punching bag. The calls multiplied like rabbits on steroids. Uncle Bob, who I haven't spoken to since Christmas 3 years ago, suddenly felt compelled to lecture me about family loyalty. Cousin Jennifer, who blocked me on Facebook after I pointed out that her MLM scheme was basically a pyramid scheme, was now sliding into my DMs with sob stories about Martin's situation. Even my grandmother, my 90-year-old grandmother who can barely work her TV remote, somehow managed to leave me a voicemail about how disappointed she was in my selfishness. The voicemail from Grandma was particularly brutal. James, sweetie, I don't understand what's gotten into you. Martin has always looked up to you as his big brother. He needs you right now, and you're turning your back on him. That's not how I raised your father, and it's not how your father raised you. Family comes first, always. Call Martin. Fix this. Always looked up to me. That's a good one, Grandma. Martin looked up to me the same way a leech looks up to its host, with appreciation for what I could provide, not respect for who I am as a person. But the real masterpiece came from cousin Tommy, who drunk dialed me at 11 p.m. on Wednesday. Tommy, who once borrowed $500 from me for car repairs and then posted Instagram stories from Vegas that same weekend. Tommy, who has never paid back a dime to anyone in the family, but somehow feels qualified to lecture me about financial responsibility. Dude, what the fuck is wrong with you? He slurred into the phone. Martin's about to lose his house, and you're just gonna let it happen? That's fucked up, man. That's really fucked up. Tommy, I said, glancing at my clock and wondering why I even answered. When's the last time you helped Martin with anything? When's the last time you helped anyone in this family with anything? That's not the point, bro. I'm not the one with money. You're the successful one. You're supposed to take care of shit like this. Supposed to take care of shit like this. According to who? According to the family charter that apparently designated me as the official cleanup crew for everyone else's disasters? The handbook I never received that outlined my responsibilities as the stable, dependable, boring one? By Thursday, I was starting to feel like I was trapped in some kind of psychological warfare experiment. Every social media notification made me cringe. Every phone call sent my blood pressure through the roof. They were relentless, coordinated, and absolutely shameless in their manipulation tactics. The worst part? They were all using the same script. Family comes first. Martin needs you. Don't be cold. This isn't like you. It was like they'd all attended some kind of guilt-tripping seminar and graduated with honors. At work, I was a wreck. I couldn't concentrate on anything, kept checking my phone obsessively, and probably looked like I was having some kind of breakdown. Which, let's be honest, I probably was. That's when Daniel noticed. Daniel's this guy from accounting who I've worked with for about 3 years. Nice enough dude. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's got this way of seeing through bullshit that I've always appreciated. We're not best friends or anything, but we grab lunch sometimes and complain about office politics and terrible management decisions. You look like someone ran over your dog, he said, sliding into the chair across from me in the break room, where I was staring at my sandwich like it held the meaning of life. Family issues, I said, which was becoming my standard response to anyone who asked why I looked like a walking disaster. Daniel nodded knowingly. The kind where everyone suddenly becomes an expert on your life decisions. I looked up at him, surprised by how accurately he'd nailed it. Something like that. Let me guess, he said, opening his own lunch. Someone in your family screwed up, and now everyone expects you to fix it because you're the responsible one. The air quotes he made around responsible told me everything I needed to know. This guy had been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. My brother, I admitted. Financial trouble. Bad financial trouble. And apparently it's my job to bail him out because I have my shit together. And when you said no, suddenly you became the villain. Exactly. It felt good to talk to someone who understood without me having to explain the whole sordid history. Daniel took a bite of his sandwich, chewed thoughtfully. You know what I learned when my sister went through her drug phase, and everyone expected me to fund her recovery for the 4th time? What? That being the stable one in a dysfunctional family is both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because you actually have your life together. It's a curse because everyone else treats that stability like it belongs to them. His words hit me like a punch to the gut, but in a good way. Like someone had finally put into words what I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. The thing is, Daniel continued, they're not really asking you to help your brother. They're asking you to enable the same pattern that got him into trouble in the first place. They want you to rescue him so they can all go back to pretending that his problems aren't really problems. But they keep saying I'm being cold, that I'm turning my back on family. Daniel laughed, but it wasn't mean. Of course they do. Because if you're the cold one, then they don't have to examine their own behavior. If you're the one being unreasonable, then they can all feel good about themselves while they pressure you into fixing everything. He leaned forward, his expression getting more serious. Can I ask you something? When's the last time any of these people calling you cold actually showed up for something that mattered to you? The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. I thought about my housewarming party, about all the times I'd invited family to work events or personal celebrations, about all the times I'd gotten generic excuses or outright no-shows. That's what I thought, Daniel said, reading my expression. They're not angry because you're being cold, James. They're angry because you're finally setting boundaries, and boundaries make people who are used to walking all over you very uncomfortable. That night, I sat in my apartment, my beautiful, hard-earned apartment that no one in my family had bothered to celebrate with me, and really let Daniel's words sink in. The phone kept ringing, the texts kept coming, the voicemails kept piling up. But for the first time since this whole mess started, I wasn't feeling guilty about ignoring them. I was feeling something else entirely. Something that tasted like freedom and felt like the first deep breath after being underwater for 32 years. Because Daniel was right. This wasn't about family loyalty or being cold or any of the other bullshit they were throwing at me. This was about power. About who gets to make decisions and who gets stuck dealing with the consequences. About who matters and who doesn't. And for the first time in my life, I was choosing to matter. Sometimes the most powerful moments happen in the quiet spaces between all the chaos. That night, after Daniel's reality check and another round of guilt-laden voicemails from relatives I hadn't heard from since the Bush administration, I found myself standing in my home office, staring at the filing cabinet like it held the secrets to the universe. It's funny how certain objects can suddenly take on this almost mystical significance. This particular filing cabinet, a boring gray metal thing I bought at Office Depot for $49, had been sitting in the corner for months, just holding paperwork and insurance documents and all the other mundane stuff that comes with being a functional adult. But tonight, it felt like a treasure chest. I pulled open the top drawer with this weird sense of ceremony, like I was about to perform some kind of ritual. Past the utilities folder, past the car insurance papers, past all the regular life maintenance documents, until my fingers found the manila folder labeled Apartment Purchase in my own neat handwriting. Inside that folder was everything. Every bank statement, every loan document, every receipt and record of the most significant financial achievement of my life. But there, right on top, was the piece of paper that mattered most, the deed to my apartment, officially recorded with the county, legally binding proof that James Monroe owned something real and substantial in this world. I pulled it out and just held it for a moment, feeling the weight of the paper between my fingers. It's such a simple thing, really, just black text on white paper, a bunch of legal language that most people would find boring as hell. But to me, in that moment, it might as well have been the Declaration of Independence. There it was, in bold letters that seemed to jump off the page, James Monroe. Not James and Claire Monroe. Not James Monroe with co-signer assistance from his parents. Just my name, standing alone, claiming ownership of something I'd earned entirely through my own effort. I thought about the journey to that moment. The 2 years of eating ramen noodles and generic cereal, so I could save every possible penny for the down payment. The weekends spent working overtime while Martin was out partying or going on spontaneous road trips funded by family handouts. The Friday nights I stayed home instead of going out because every dollar I didn't spend was a dollar closer to my goal. I remembered the day I made the final payment, how I'd sat in the bank manager's office signing what felt like 1,000 documents, how surreal it felt to hand over a check for that much money and know that I wasn't going into debt for it. I'd saved enough to buy the place outright. No mortgage, no monthly payments to some faceless corporation, no strings attached to anyone or anything except my own hard work. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, the boring one, the responsible one, the one who supposedly didn't know how to have fun or live life to the fullest, and I'd managed to accomplish something that none of my more exciting family members had ever come close to achieving. At 32, I owned my home free and clear while Martin was about to lose his because he couldn't manage his finances well enough to make mortgage payments. I walked over to my kitchen counter and spread the deed out under the bright overhead lights, smoothing out the creases where it had been folded in the filing cabinet. Then I pulled out my phone and carefully positioned it to capture the entire document, making sure the letterhead was visible, making sure my name stood out clearly, making sure every official seal and signature was in frame. The photo came out perfect. Crystal clear, professional looking, undeniably authentic. I stared at it for a long moment, thumb hovering over the screen as I composed the caption in my mind. I wanted something simple but powerful, something that would speak for itself without being too obvious about what I was really doing. Built this life on my own. Some stories tell themselves. Short, sweet, and loaded with meaning for anyone who knew the context. I wasn't mentioning Martin directly, wasn't throwing anyone under the bus explicitly, wasn't even referencing the drama of the past few days. I was just sharing a fact, A simple, documented, legally certified fact about my life and my achievements. But I didn't post it. Not yet. Something held me back, some instinct that told me this was a weapon I could only use once, so I better make sure the timing was right. Instead, I just sat there holding my phone, looking back and forth between the photo and the actual deed, feeling this strange combination of pride and power that I'd never experienced before. For 32 years, I'd been living my life according to other people's expectations and definitions of success. I was the reliable one, the stable one, the one who didn't cause drama or make waves or demand attention. I was the supporting character in everyone else's story, the one who showed up when needed and disappeared into the background when the excitement was over. But this deed told a different story. This piece of paper was proof that I wasn't just the family cleanup crew or the emergency contact for when things went wrong. I was a person who set goals and achieved them, who made sacrifices and saw them pay off, who built something lasting and meaningful entirely through my own efforts. I thought about all the times Martin had mocked my boring lifestyle. The jokes about my budgeting spreadsheets, my meal planning, my reluctance to blow money on spontaneous trips or expensive toys. The way he'd roll his eyes when I declined to go out drinking because I was saving for something important. The way the whole family had treated my financial discipline like some kind of character flaw instead of a strength. Well, look who's laughing now, Martin. Look whose boring lifestyle resulted in actual security and independence, and whose exciting lifestyle resulted in begging family members for bailouts. I picked up the deed again, running my finger along the edge of the paper. This wasn't just a legal document. It was proof of independence. Proof that I didn't need anyone else's approval or assistance to build a life worth living. Proof that all those years of being overlooked and undervalued had actually been years of becoming stronger and more self-sufficient than any of them. The phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. Claire's name flashed on the screen, and for a split second, I felt that old familiar urge to answer, to smooth things over, to be the accommodating husband who never caused problems. But then I looked at the deed in my other hand, and that urge died a quick death. Let it ring. Let her wonder what I'm thinking, what I'm planning, what I might do next. For once in my life, I was holding all the cards, and I wasn't in any hurry to show my hand. I carefully folded the deed and put it back in the filing cabinet, but I kept the photo on my phone. My ace in the hole. My proof that James Monroe was nobody's backup plan or emergency fund. I was a man who'd built something solid and lasting, and I'd done it without anyone's help. The power of that realization was intoxicating. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't worried about what my family thought of me or whether I was living up to their expectations. I had concrete, legal, undeniable proof that I was doing just fine on my own. Better than fine, actually. I was thriving. While they'd been too busy celebrating Martin's latest adventure to notice my achievements, I'd been quietly building the kind of life that most people only dream about. Financial independence, a beautiful home, career stability, all the things that Martin's exciting lifestyle had failed to provide him. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down at my kitchen table, looking around at the apartment I'd worked so hard to afford. Every piece of furniture, every appliance, every decoration had been chosen and purchased by me. No family loans, no co-signers, no strings attached. This was my space, my sanctuary, my proof that the boring, responsible James Monroe was actually the most successful member of his family. And tomorrow, if the guilt campaign continued, if the pressure kept mounting, if they kept calling me cold and selfish for refusing to bail out their golden boy, I had something they couldn't argue with or dismiss or minimize. I had proof that their version of my story was complete bullshit. The quiet confidence that came with that knowledge felt better than any family approval I'd ever received. Because this wasn't dependent on their recognition or validation. This was just true, whether they acknowledged it or not. And soon, everyone would know exactly how true it was. Sometimes the universe has this twisted sense of timing that would be hilarious if it wasn't happening to you. I'd been sitting on that photo of my apartment deed for 3 days, carrying it around in my phone like a loaded weapon I wasn't quite ready to fire. But Friday afternoon, while I'm trying to focus on quarterly reports and pretending my personal life isn't a complete dumpster fire, my phone rings with a number I haven't seen in about 2 years. Martin, my dear brother Martin, calling me directly for the first time since. Actually, I can't remember the last time Martin called me for anything that wasn't borrowing money or asking for a favor. I stare at his contact photo, some selfie he took on a ski trip that Dad paid for, all perfect teeth and expensive sunglasses, and debate whether to answer. Part of me is curious to hear what his angle is going to be, whether he'll try the guilt approach or go straight for emotional manipulation. Curiosity wins, so I swipe to answer. Well, look who remembers my phone number. James. His voice sounds rough, like he's been crying or hasn't slept, and despite everything, there's this tiny part of me that actually feels bad for him. 32 years of conditioning don't disappear overnight, apparently. We need to talk. Do we? Because last I checked, you needed to go fishing instead of celebrating your brother's new apartment. Funny how your priorities keep shifting. There's this long pause, and when he speaks again, his voice is cracked and broken in a way I've never heard before. Look, I know you're pissed about the housewarming thing. I get it. We fucked up, okay? But James, I'm drowning here. I'm literally about to lose everything. And what exactly does that have to do with me? You're my brother. The words come out like a desperate plea. You can't just let me drown. We're blood, man. That has to count for something. Blood. Right. The same blood that apparently meant nothing when I needed my family to show up for one night. The same blood that's been thin as water every time I've needed support or recognition or just basic acknowledgement of my existence. Was I your brother when you chose fishing over my housewarming? I ask, and my voice is so calm it surprises even me. Because I distinctly remember checking my family status that night, and it seemed to have been revoked. Come on, don't be like that. You know that was different. I was having a panic attack about all this shit, and Dad thought getting me out on the water would help clear my head. So you had a panic attack, and the solution was to take the entire family fishing and post about it on social media? That's some next-level therapy right there, Martin. It wasn't like that. What was it like then? Because from where I'm sitting, it looked like you decided your feelings were more important than my celebration, and everyone else agreed with you. Like always. The silence stretches between us, and I can hear him breathing heavily on the other end. James, please. I'm begging you here. These people I owe money to. They're not the kind of people who take no for an answer. I could lose my house, my business, everything I've worked for, everything he's worked for. That's rich. Martin's business is some half-assed contracting company that he runs out of his garage, taking on jobs he's not qualified for, and then scrambling to fix his mistakes when they inevitably go wrong. The house he's about to lose? Dad co-signed for that mortgage because Martin's credit was already shot from previous financial disasters. Tell me something, Martin, I say, leaning back in my office chair. When you posted all those photos from your fishing trip, did it occur to you how that might make me feel? Did you think for even 1 second about your brother sitting alone in his new apartment, waiting for his family to show up? We weren't thinking about that. We were just trying to help me deal with. You weren't thinking about me. Period. You never think about me unless you need something from me. And now you need something from me. So suddenly, I'm your brother again. That's not fair. Fair. I'm laughing now, but it's not a happy sound. You want to talk about fair? Fair would be your family showing up to celebrate the biggest achievement of your brother's life. Fair would be getting a congratulations text or a phone call, or literally any acknowledgement that you're proud of what I accomplished. Fair would be not having to find out through Facebook that my entire family chose someone else over me. Martin's quiet for a long moment, and when he speaks again, his voice is barely a whisper. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm really, truly sorry about the housewarming. We should have been there. I know that now. You're sorry now? Now that you need money from me. How convenient. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, Martin. You're not sorry you hurt me. You're sorry that hurting me might interfere with getting what you want from me. I hang up before he can respond, and immediately my hands are shaking with this combination of adrenaline and rage and something that feels almost like relief. Because finally, I said what I've been thinking for years instead of just swallowing it and playing the role of the understanding, supportive brother. That's when I decide it's time. I pull up the photo of my apartment deed, the one I've been carrying around like ammunition, and I look at it again. Clean, professional, undeniable proof of what I've accomplished entirely on my own. No family loans, no co-signers, no safety net except my own hard work and discipline. I open Facebook and create a new post, uploading the photo and typing the caption I've been refining in my head for days. Built this life on my own. Some stories tell themselves. My finger hovers over the post button for about 10 seconds. Once I do this, there's no taking it back. Once this goes live, everyone will see exactly what James Monroe has been up to while they were all focused on Martin's latest drama. I hit post. Within minutes, the likes and comments start pouring in. Friends from work, college buddies I haven't talked to in years, neighbors, even Mrs. Garcia from across the hall who apparently knows how to use Facebook better than I thought. Holy shit, James. You bought that place outright? Dude, this is incredible. Congratulations. Wait, you own that apartment? No mortgage? How did you swing that? This is amazing. I'm so proud of you. Comment after comment of genuine excitement and congratulations, the kind of response I should have gotten from my family when I actually bought the place. The kind of response I was hoping for at my housewarming party that nobody attended. But it's the private messages that really get to me. Daniel from work. Fucking legend. I knew you had something up your sleeve. Oliver, my old college roommate who I haven't talked to in months. Bro, I always knew you'd be the one to make it. This is incredible. Even my high school friend Sarah. I saw this and literally said holy shit out loud in the grocery store. You're amazing. For the first time in my adult life, I'm getting the recognition and validation that I deserve, and it's coming from people who actually know me and respect me, not from people who only pay attention when they need something. But the real fireworks start about an hour later. My phone starts buzzing with notifications from family members commenting on the post, and their tone is different. Gone is the casual dismissal of my achievements, the backhanded compliments, the subtle undermining that's been the soundtrack of my life for 32 years. Claire's comment is the first one I see. We're so proud of you. Can't wait to celebrate properly. Too little, too late, sweetheart. Then Dad. That's my boy. Always knew you had it in you. Really? Because your actions have suggested otherwise for the past 3 decades. But it's the private messages that really tell the story. Claire texts me. Take it down. You're humiliating us. Then, a few minutes later, people are asking questions about why we weren't at your housewarming. This is embarrassing. Embarrassing. Not, we're sorry we hurt you. Or, we realize we made a mistake. Just, this is embarrassing for us. Because even now, even when faced with undeniable proof of their shitty behavior, they can only think about how this affects them. I type back, funny. I said the same thing when you humiliated me by choosing Martin's fishing trip over my celebration. The response is immediate. That's different, and you know it. No, Claire. That's exactly the same thing. The only difference is that this time, everyone gets to see the truth instead of just me feeling it. More messages flood in from other family members. Aunt Susan. This post is causing problems. Family business should stay private. Uncle Bob. Take this down before it causes more drama. Even Grandma. Bless her heart. I don't understand all this computer stuff, but your mother says you're causing trouble. Causing trouble? By sharing my achievements. By celebrating my success. By refusing to hide the fact that I accomplished something significant while they were all too busy fawning over Martin to notice. But the best part, the absolute cherry on top of this whole beautiful disaster, comes at the end of the day when my phone rings with a call from Martin himself. You son of a bitch, he says without preamble, and his voice is shaking with rage. Do you have any idea what you've done? I shared a photo of my apartment deed. You know, that thing I earned by working my ass off instead of relying on family handouts. People at my work are laughing at me. They're saying I'm pathetic for needing money from my little brother who has his shit together better than I do. And that's my problem, Hal. Take it down, James. Right fucking now. No. Take it down or what? You'll throw another tantrum? You'll get the family to gang up on me again? You'll miss another one of my important moments while you deal with your feelings? The silence on the other end is deafening. Here's the thing, Martin. I continue, and my voice is steady as steel. For 32 years, I've been editing my life to make you feel better about yours. I've downplayed my achievements, hidden my success, and accepted scraps of attention while you got the feast. But I'm done with that now. James. The post stays up. The truth stays public. And if that embarrasses you or makes you uncomfortable or hurts your feelings, then maybe you should have thought about that before you spent 3 decades treating me like I didn't matter. I hang up, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I feel completely, utterly, absolutely free. You know what they say about the truth? It has this nasty habit of spreading like wildfire once it gets loose. My little Facebook post might have seemed like just one guy sharing a photo of his apartment deed, but apparently I'd lit a fuse that was connected to a much bigger powder keg than I'd realized. The first sign that something major was shifting came Sunday morning when I'm at the grocery store, minding my own business in the cereal aisle, and I run into Mrs. Henderson from church. Now, Mrs. Henderson is what you might generously call the neighborhood information hub, meaning she knows everyone's business and isn't shy about sharing it. Normally, she gives me this polite but distant smile and maybe asks how my mother's doing. This time, she practically tackles me by the Cheerios. "James Monroe," she says, loud enough that half the store can hear her. "I saw your post online, and I have to say, good for you. It's about time someone called out your family for how they treat you." I'm standing there holding a box of generic cornflakes, wondering how the hell Mrs. Henderson is friends with me on Facebook, when she leans in conspiratorially and drops this bombshell. "You know, we all noticed when your family didn't show up to your housewarming. The whole congregation was talking about it during coffee hour. Such a shame, really. Here you are, buying your own place at your age, no help from anyone, and they can't even be bothered to celebrate with you." The whole congregation. Jesus Christ. I knew small towns had their gossip networks, but I didn't realize my family's dysfunction had become Sunday morning entertainment for the entire Methodist Church. "It's been quite a week," I managed to say, because what else do you say when your personal life becomes community theater? "Oh, I bet it has," she says, patting my arm like I'm some kind of wounded bird. "But you know what? Sometimes it takes a little public embarrassment to make people realize how badly they've been behaving. Mark my words, your brother Martin's going to be feeling this for a while." She's not wrong about that. Over the next few days, I start hearing through the grapevine just how far the ripple effects of my little truth bomb have spread, and honestly, it's more devastating than I could have imagined. Apparently, Martin's co-workers at the construction company where he does contract work had seen my post and put two and two together. Here's Martin, going around for weeks talking about how his family was going to help him out of his financial jam, how his reliable little brother was good for it, how blood is thicker than water, and all that bullshit. And then boom, there's his reliable little brother posting proof that he's successful enough to buy property outright, while Martin can't even keep up with his mortgage payments. The jokes started immediately, according to my friend Jake, who works in construction and knows some of Martin's crew. "Hey Martin, maybe you should ask your little brother for budgeting lessons." "Damn, Martin, your brother's got his shit together better than you do, and he's younger. Maybe next time you should skip the fishing trip and go to your brother's housewarming. Might pick up some tips on not being broke." But it gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. Claire's book club. Yes, my soon-to-be ex-wife has a book club, and no, they don't actually read books, they just drink wine and gossip, had also seen the post. And according to my neighbor Janet, who's married to a guy whose sister is in said book club, Claire had been bragging for months about how successful and stable I was, how lucky she was to have such a reliable husband, how we were planning to start a family soon now that we had the perfect home. Except now everyone knew that we hadn't bought anything. James Monroe had bought something, and he'd done it without any help from his wife, who couldn't even be bothered to show up and celebrate with him. The same wife who was now publicly asking him to take down posts about his own achievements because they were embarrassing to her. The book club ladies, according to Janet's sister-in-law, had started asking pointed questions. "If James is so successful and you're so proud of him, why weren't you at his housewarming? Did you know he could afford to buy a place outright? Are you guys having problems? You seem to spend a lot of time at your brother-in-law's events instead of celebrating your husband's accomplishments." Claire, apparently, had left the last book club meeting early and hadn't been answering her phone when the ladies tried to check on her. But the absolute masterpiece of unintended consequences came through my old college friend Oliver, who reached out Wednesday night with a story that was so perfect I almost couldn't believe it was real. Oliver works in marketing now, lives about an hour away, and apparently still keeps in touch with some of our mutual college friends through various social media groups. He'd shared my post in one of these groups with a comment about how proud he was of me for achieving financial independence so young, and how he'd always known I'd be the one to make it. This caught the attention of Brad, another guy from our college crew who I haven't talked to in probably 5 years. Brad, it turns out, works at the same company where Dad has been employed for the past 15 years. Small world, right? So Brad sees Oliver's post about me, recognizes my last name, puts two and two together, and realizes that James Monroe, the successful apartment owner, is the son of Jim Monroe from the accounting department. Brad, being a decent human being, stops by Dad's office Monday morning to congratulate him on having such a successful kid. According to Oliver, who got this story secondhand from Brad, Dad's reaction was, let's call it complicated. Apparently, he got this weird look on his face and mumbled something about family business, and it's not what it looks like. Then he spent the rest of the conversation trying to change the subject and making excuses for why he hadn't mentioned my recent real estate investment to anyone at work. Brad, who's not an idiot, picked up on the weird energy and started asking questions. Casual questions, the kind you ask when you're trying to figure out why someone's acting sketchy about what should be good news. Questions like, when did James buy the place? And did you guys throw him a housewarming party? And man, he must have been saving for years to afford something like that. Dad's answers, according to Brad's report to Oliver, were evasive and uncomfortable. No, they hadn't thrown a party. Yes, James had been saving for a long time. No, it wasn't really a family celebration, more of a personal milestone. The whole conversation left Brad with the distinct impression that there was some kind of family drama going on, and that maybe Jim Monroe wasn't as proud of his successful son as he should be. Word spreads fast in office environments, especially when someone's acting weird about something that should be straightforward good news. By the end of the week, half of Dad's department had heard some version of the story, and the general consensus was that Jim Monroe's family situation was complicated, and maybe he was jealous of his son's success. The final nail in the coffin came when Oliver called me Thursday night, laughing so hard he could barely get the words out. Dude, he said, you have to hear this. Brad told me that your dad actually went to HR today to complain that people were asking too many personal questions about his family. HR told him that congratulating someone on their child's success isn't harassment, and maybe if he acted like he was proud of you, people would stop wondering why he's being so weird about it. I sat there holding the phone, trying to process the beautiful irony of the situation. Dad, who had spent decades minimizing my achievements and prioritizing Martin's drama over my milestones, was now facing professional embarrassment because his coworkers couldn't understand why he wasn't celebrating his successful son. James, Oliver said, you still there, man? Yeah, I said, and I was smiling so hard my face hurt. I'm here. I'm just processing. Listen, I don't know what's going on with your family, but I want you to know that everyone who saw your post is genuinely impressed and happy for you. Like, seriously impressed. Most of us are still paying off student loans and living paycheck to paycheck, and here you are owning property free and clear at 32. That's incredible, man. Thanks, Oliver. That means a lot. And whatever drama is happening with your family over this, don't let them make you feel bad about your success. You earned this, and you have every right to be proud of it. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment, my beautiful, debt-free, fully owned apartment, and thought about how quickly things can change when people finally see the truth instead of the story they've been told. For 32 years, my family had controlled the narrative about who I was and what I was worth. I was the boring one, the reliable one, the one who didn't need attention or recognition because that's just how I was. But now that narrative was crumbling, and everyone could see it wasn't based on reality. I wasn't the boring one, I was the successful one. I wasn't the reliable one, I was the independent one. I wasn't the one who didn't need recognition. I was the one who'd been systematically denied it. And now, finally, the whole world could see the difference. 1 week after my little social media truth bomb, they all show up. Not individually this time, not with phone calls or guilt trips or manipulation tactics. The whole damn family arrives at my door like some kind of dysfunctional Avengers squad, and I can hear them arguing in the hallway before they even knock. Through the peephole, it's like looking at a greatest hits collection of my childhood trauma. Mom, Dad, Martin, Claire, even Jessica dragged along for moral support. They're huddled together like they're planning a siege, which, let's be honest, they probably are. The banging starts, aggressive, demanding, the kind of knock that says, we're not leaving until you open this door. So I do, but I don't step aside. I lean against the frame like I did with Claire before, except this time I'm facing the entire firing squad. Well, I say, keeping my voice perfectly calm, Look who remembered where I live. The whole family reunion committee. Mom starts crying immediately, because of course she does. Those perfectly timed tears that have been getting her out of accountability for decades. James, sweetie, we made a mistake. We're here to apologize and work this out as a family. Apologize? I almost laugh. Mom, you've had a week to apologize. Instead, you've been telling me to take down my post because it's embarrassing you. Dad steps forward, his face red with that familiar rage. We wouldn't be embarrassed if you hadn't aired our family business all over the internet like some kind of attention-seeking. Stop right there. My voice cuts through his bluster like a blade. Don't you dare make this about me seeking attention. I shared one photo of my own achievement. The fact that it exposed your shitty behavior isn't my fault. James, please. Claire tries, reaching toward me, but I step back. Can we just talk inside? Like civilized people. Civilized people keep their commitments. Civilized people show up when they say they will. Civilized people don't abandon their husband's celebration to go fishing. Martin finally speaks up, his voice cracked and desperate. Look, I know we screwed up the housewarming thing, but this post is ruining my life. People at work are laughing at me. My clients are asking questions. You're destroying me over one night. One night. The words come out flat and cold. Martin, this isn't about one night. This is about 32 years of being treated like I don't matter unless you need something from me. Mom's crying gets louder. That's not true. We love you. We've always been proud of you. Proud enough to skip my housewarming for Martin's fishing trip. Proud enough to never mention my accomplishments to anyone. Proud enough to treat me like the family ATM whenever there's a crisis. Dad's voice booms through the hallway. Stop being selfish, James. Martin could lose everything because of your petty revenge. Selfish. I feel something snap inside me. You want to talk about selfish? Selfish is ditching your son's celebration. Selfish is 32 years of making Martin the center of the universe. Selfish is standing in my hallway demanding I fix problems I didn't create. The silence that follows is deafening. Here's what's going to happen. I continue, my voice steady as steel. You're going to leave. All of you. You made your choice last week when you chose Martin's drama over my achievement. Now you get to live with the consequences. James, you can't just cut us off, Jessica pleads. We're family. Family shows up. Family keeps promises. Family doesn't treat one member like he's disposable while worshiping the other. I look each of them in the eye. You don't get to rewrite this story anymore. Claire's face crumples. What about us? Our marriage. You made that choice too, Claire. When you chose your brother-in-law over your husband. I start to close the door, but Dad shoves his foot forward. We made one mistake. No, Dad. You made a choice. Every single day for 32 years, you chose Martin over me. Last week was just the first time everyone else got to see it. I closed the door firmly, and this time when they pound and yell and demand I let them back in, I don't budge. Because for the first time in my life, I'm choosing myself over their dysfunction. And it feels like freedom. 3 months later, Thanksgiving arrives like the ultimate test of my newfound backbone. In the past, this would have been the day I'd dutifully show up at Mom's house, bringing the expensive wine and pretending everything was fine while Martin got praised for remembering to bring rolls from the grocery store. This year I'm doing something revolutionary. I'm having my own damn Thanksgiving. My apartment is transformed into something that actually looks like a celebration instead of a desperate plea for attention. The table I bought with my own money is set for 8, with real cloth napkins and the good dishes I splurged on after my social media truth bomb went viral. The smell of turkey, a modest 12-pounder because I'm not feeding an army of ungrateful relatives, fills the air along with homemade stuffing and cranberry sauce that actually required effort. Daniel from work arrives first, carrying a bottle of wine and grinning like he's won the lottery. Man, this place looks incredible. I can't believe you're cooking for all of us. Believe it, I say, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in months. I figured it was time to host people who actually show up when they say they will. Oliver drives in from an hour away, brings his girlfriend Sarah, who I've heard so much about, and immediately starts gushing about my apartment like he's giving a real estate tour. Dude, I still can't believe you own this place outright. You're living the dream. Mrs. Garcia shuffles over from across the hall with her famous flan and a smile that could power a small city. Mijo, this smells better than anything I ever made. You're going to make some lucky woman very happy someday. The irony isn't lost on me that my elderly neighbor has more faith in my future romantic prospects than my soon-to-be ex-wife ever did. Jake shows up with his wife and their baby, who immediately becomes the center of attention in the best possible way. James, I have to tell you, watching you stand up to your family has been inspiring as hell. Half the guys at work have been talking about setting boundaries with their own toxic relatives. We're sitting around my table, laughing about work stories and college memories, when my phone buzzes with a text from my cousin Tommy. Yes, the same cousin who drunk dialed me to call me selfish. The message is a photo of my family's Thanksgiving table, which looks about as cheerful as a funeral reception. Mom's sitting at one and looking like she's lost her best friend, Dad scowling at his plate like the turkey personally offended him, and Martin slumped in his chair with the defeated look of a man whose golden child status couldn't save him from the consequences of his own actions. Claire's there too, apparently, sitting as far from my empty chair as possible. The caption reads, "Not the same without you, man." Mom's been crying all day. I show the photo to Daniel, who nearly chokes on his wine. Holy shit, they look miserable. Good. Is that terrible of me? I ask, though I'm still smiling, that I'm kind of enjoying their misery. Are you kidding? Oliver jumps in. They spent 32 years making you miserable while they celebrated their golden boy. A little taste of their own medicine is long overdue. As if the universe wants to punctuate his point, my phone buzzes again. This time it's a voicemail notification from Claire. I almost ignore it, but curiosity gets the better of me. I step into the kitchen and play it on speaker. Her voice is trembling, heavy with tears, and what sounds like genuine regret. James, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please talk to me. The house feels empty without you. Thanksgiving feels empty. Everything feels empty. I know I screwed up. I know I chose wrong. But please don't give up on us completely. I delete the voicemail without hesitation. Because here's the thing I've learned over the past 3 months. Revenge isn't about anger or spite or making people suffer. Real revenge is walking away from people who don't value you and building a life so good that their absence becomes a blessing instead of a loss. I walk back to my dining room where my chosen family is debating whether pumpkin pie or flan is the superior dessert, where people are laughing at my jokes and genuinely interested in my stories, where I'm not the reliable background character, but the host of my own celebration. Standing in my doorway, looking out over this scene of actual happiness and genuine connection, I realize something profound. I don't need their apologies anymore. I don't need their recognition or validation or belated attempts to make things right. I have something better. I have peace. I have people who show up. I have a life I built entirely on my own terms. And that, it turns out, is the sweetest revenge of all.